Frozle Empire, continent-spanning juggernaut, steamrolled the outmatched Rand kingdom. They slammed a warning into young Heinrich. Brace yourself, a merciless reality is coming. The commander slams his hand on the table and bellows, fight now, and it's a death sentence. A gut punch reminder slams into him. As a royal bastard, his only hope is to cooperate. The young prince snarls at the word, surrender, fury flaring like a storm behind his eyes. The commander crushes every other idea as nothing but wishful thinking. Heinrich Scoff grits his teeth. His title means nothing to their conquerors. The commander's jaw drops as the prince rips into himself with a bleak self-assessment. He brazenly calls his own kingdom trash, grinning as his commander reels in dismay. What a charming rogue. Meanwhile, the imperial army surges onward, 10,000 warriors, boots hammering the earth like thunder. Just 53 men stayed behind and held the rear as the main army retreated. Heinrich still seethes at the court's relentless scorn, how they used him and discarded him like a pawn. He claws through the wreckage of his past and the bleakness around him, refusing to let either crush his will. Smoldering fury detonates inside him. He crushes the cup in his grip, and it explodes into glittering shards. Rage ripped through him as he blasted the kingdom's leaders for being insane enough to provoke that monster. A nearby portrait of a noble taunts him with an idiotic grin, that smug, ridiculous mask worshipped as the very face of competence. The commander roared, desperate to rally them, invoking the Rice family's noble legacy like a battle cry. Heinrich and a fellow soldier scoffed, the history lesson sliding off them like water off armor. He seethes over his kingdom's rot, clinging to one thin mercy: the civilians aren't paying with their lives. He spins to the commander and snaps that he'd expected far more from him. The commander leans in and admits he sees straight through Heinrich's facade. He knows the truth. He hails Heinrich's uncanny knack for political maneuvering. He wielded a razor-sharp rationality and the ironclad bearing of a true ruler. Heinrich snaps back, insisting he's not fit to lead anyone. The commander roars that he wields a rare gift for leadership. He bursts out that Heinrich faked incompetence and by that clever trick snagged their loyalty. This tiny, forsaken unit was shoved aside and left to die. Every single man surged forward to volunteer for the post, the commander himself throwing his name into the ring. They rallied behind him, gambling their lives on the snap of his command. He bore royal composure like armor, wielded a razor-sharp intellect, and hid a smoldering charisma, a true leader in disguise. The commander declared Heinrich's deed had ripped them from mere subordinates and forged them into fierce, loyal retainers. He reels at the thought of what might have happened if the prince had stormed the throne. He knows unleashing his true talent would have painted a target on his back. He stakes their lives on any command: fight, flee, or surrender. Heinrich ducks the question and snaps, "Don't saddle a lazy man with that choice." A cold, knowing smile curls on the commander's lips. He sees right through the prince's humble act. His face snaps hard as he pins Heinrich with a stare, demanding a final answer. The prince's eyes narrowed into steel as the fate of 53 lives slammed onto his shoulders like a boulder. He snarls at the commander, "Do you want us to launch a reckless charge and die in glory?" The commander shoots back, dead serious, that he wouldn't mind one bit. Heinrich slams the options onto the table: surrender to save their skins or hurl themselves into battle for a doomed nation. The commander shrugs, calm as the eye of a storm, and declares, "Pick one, both suit me." He declares he once swore an unbreakable oath to protect his country. He ripped his loyalty from the Rand kingdom and pledged it to Heinrich alone. He roars that every man left in this unit feels the exact same way. Beyond the soldier's watch, a silent salute snaps up, a wordless pledge of allegiance. Whatever decision he makes, they'll fall in line behind it. No questions, no hesitation. The commander cracks a crooked grin, lines in, and dares him to choose something he won't regret. No pressure, kid. Heinrich freezes as the crushing weight of their faith rips the words right out of him. A small, knowing smile blooms across his face. The act is finally over. A fierce new blaze ignites in Heinrich's eyes as he embraces their ironclad resolve. He explodes into motion, roaring for every last soldier to assemble at once. The commander gapes, frozen and breathless, utterly dumbstruck by the prince he's finally unleashed. Heinrich locks eyes with them and vows he won't steer them into certain doom. He roars they'll choose a third path, snatching the future even if it taints their name. Inside the fortress walls, the small garrison pressed close, hanging on his every word as he unveiled his plan. He strides into their midst, fixes his gaze on the Death Seekers, and bellows a fierce thanks for gathering. The soldiers grin, flashing knowing smirks as they rib him about the same stubborn, abrasive charm he still wears. Heinrich shoots back that he'd collapse under this mess without a little sarcasm. Fair enough, kid. He and his men erupt into thunderous laughter, morale exploding to an all-time high. Heinrich launches the briefing, slicing through the silence as he lays bare the brutal reality of their situation. He spelled out the enemy's strength. His men hung on every word, jaws clamping as their faces clenched into iron. He rips the veil off the Empire's trump card, the continent's most advanced magic, a system that weaponized a secret art, placing its power in the hands of legions of mages. Their second strength is industrial might, churning out advanced firearms by the thousands. He saved the most terrifying threat for last, then thrust 3 fingers into the air. He proclaims the Flame God, a legendary being, a master of magic who bends fire to his will. A god spun from pure magic, a walking cataclysm that could snuff entire nations from existence. He forces a calm voice and insists the being isn't here. If it were, the war would already be over. Heinrich erupts into laughter, equal parts awe and disbelief, at the sheer lunacy of anyone daring to challenge that monster. He flashes a cocky grin and declares, if luck's a skill, then we're the true powerhouses. His men snapped, they're done with his self-deprecating shtick. Their protests slammed against the fortress walls, pleading with him to silence his grim words. Heinrich roars that he'll cast off his useless name to repay their loyalty. His soldiers froze, jaws dropping, as the leader they'd always known materialized before their eyes. Not a single word escapes him. He plunges to one knee. The rest of the unit falls in behind him, heads bowing as they swear a solemn pledge. Heinrich's eyes harden into iron. This is his way of repaying their devotion. He roars that their loyalty saved the kingdom, but its fall is already sealed. The commander bellowed, slamming the truth into their faces. This very kingdom betrayed their prince. The commander staggered as a crushing pressure slammed into him, a presence unlike anything he'd ever seen. Heinrich roared he'd shoulder the future of every man here himself. He slams a finger onto the royal crest and bellows that they alone are the kingdom's true saviors. The lazy, incompetent prince was swept aside, and in his place stands a leader with fire blazing in his eyes. He bellows that they're the hero's history will remember for saving the nation. Recognition slams into the commander. This is the true Heinrich, a prodigy driven into hiding. This is the real prince, the one they all swore to march with straight into the jaws of death. Heinrich suddenly rips off his act, cheeks burning as he sheepishly admits it was supposed to be a secret, real smooth transition, buddy. He flashes a cocky grin and declares he's been stockpiling a couple of secret tricks for this very moment. The commander, ever the pragmatist, snapped, will these tricks actually help us win? Heinrich shot them a confident grin and vowed his tricks would do far more than just help. His plan zeroes in on the Imperial Army's camp, a daring gambit that could upend the entire war. Inside the camp, an Imperial commander yawns in contempt, scoffing at the entire spectacle as utterly dull. A subordinate hustles forward, drops into a crisp bow before the board leader, and reverently hails, Your Excellency, Klaus. Klaus doesn't deny it. He watches his army's success like a sideshow, face cold and utterly unimpressed. He sneers, declaring this so-called grand war nothing but tedious drudgery. His aide gapes, stunned, insisting they're winning with almost 0 casualties. For Klaus, a victory this easy rings hollow. It's no victory at all. She strode in, eye patch flashing, and sneered that the Rand kingdom was utterly pathetic. Her jaw dropped. They'd goaded the enemy, and the fools charged headfirst into the conflict. They slammed Klaus with a brutal truth. The Rand kingdom's leaders are utterly inept, coddled by peace and untouched by real war for ages. A fed-up sigh rips from him as he aches for a worthy opponent to make this tedious job mean something. The woman with the eye patch stared him down and asked, What will you do if something unexpected happens? Klaus's eyes snapped into focus, a spark of interest flaring to life. A wicked little grin curls on his lips at the faintest hint of a possibility. A scout barrels into the tent, drops to one knee, and blasts out an urgent report. He snaps, target fortress in sight, about 50 soldiers massed outside. The scout gaped, voice cracking, as he blurted that the enemy soldiers stood locked in a perfect formation. Standing before them all, a single man, their commander, holds them with a deadly calm, waiting for them. Heinrich stands alone, defiant, every fiber braced to face the Empire's crushing might. That welcome party is an onslaught ready to swallow him. Klaus shot to his feet, eyes blazing as he thundered for an explanation of this preposterous report. His subordinates scramble for answers, washed in unease as the chilling move lands with no clear purpose. Outside the fortress, Heinrich's men froze into a flawless, silent phalanx. Boredom shatters, Klaus' face erupts into a wild grin as he yanks his greatsword into his hands. He roared he'd storm the front lines to see the spectacle with his own eyes. The eye-patched woman recoiled, shock exploding in her eyes as she snapped, "Why would you act so recklessly?" She lunges, grabbing his arm, pleading the commander can't go, it's suicide. Klaus and his officers were already barreling out, drawn irresistibly to the mysterious enemy leader. He freezes, weighing it, bold gambit or sheer stupidity. Either way, he can't help but take a closer look. Riding to the front, Klaus charges forward and fixes the lone prince with a curious smirk. Klaus zeroed in on a man with reddish-brown hair and a warrior's build. The Imperial commander smirked, voice dripping with scorn, "So you finally met the person in charge." Heinrich's eyes slitted into razor focus as he straightened, steeling himself to formally announce his name. He thunders his name and title, the incompetent youngest prince of the Rand Kingdom. To the Imperial army, he's just one lone man squaring off against thousands. Heinrich locked eyes with his opponent and thundered, "So you're the famed war dragon." He straightens, voice thundering, and proclaims, "I am Klaus Julius Frusel, the Emperor's own son. The Empire's second prince, no mere noble, a living legend feared and revered across battlefields, the war dragon." All neighboring nations tremble at the thought of facing his brutal, unmatched skill in personal combat. Heinrich shrugs, smirks, and tosses out the audacious idea, "End this ridiculous war and go grab a drink." Klaus's officers froze, jaws dropped, eyes wide, utterly dumbfounded by this bizarre proposal. The woman with the eye patch locks onto him, fury sparking as she calls out his nerve and scoffs at that careless grin. Klaus throws back his head and laughs, sneering, "Heinrich, are you a fool or a man worth talking to?" He snaps back to the intel on the fourth prince, lazy, arrogant, utterly useless. As Klaus stared at the man before him, every claim in those reports began to crumble in his mind. Suspicion flares across the war dragon's face. Something isn't right. His aide catches the shift instantly as Klaus snaps into defense, muscles coiling and his guard shooting up. He sniffs out the whole thing as a ploy, a desperate, last-ditch bid to surrender and save his own skin. Heinrich's unblinking stare obliterates the very idea of surrender. The Imperial prince reeled, his confident smirk finally cracking. Heinrich roared, "I won't surrender without a fight." Klaus snapped, voice razor-sharp, "What meaning can there be in such futile resistance?" Heinrich admits that, if he were alone, he'd have thrown down his sword and abandoned the battlefield. The war dragon's eyes narrowed to slits, drilling into the young prince to unmask his true motive. Heinrich roared that he wouldn't back down. He couldn't betray the honor of the men standing behind him. Klaus snarled at him, "If they dare to fight, the Imperial army will give them no mercy." Heinrich roars that this is his reckoning, one last stand for his men. He repays their loyalty with unyielding duty, a fire he carries as their lord and as a man. From the fortress walls his soldiers strain to hear, faces like forged steel and eyes blazing with unwavering resolve. Klaus's jaw dropped, the logic stunned him. Guest honor isn't even in the Imperial training manual. Klaus' roar tore through the hall as he bellowed, ordering the incompetent prince to snatch his words back and kneel, begging for his life. Heinrich smirks, steel flashing in his eyes, poised to charge the so-called lizard prince. He slams down a challenge, an old-school, one-on-one duel to settle the score. The war dragon roars its acceptance and hurtles into a furious charge, cracking the earth beneath him. Their blades slammed together, Klaus's strike died on the spot, and shock froze him solid. Their clash rips the earth apart, a brutal testament to the raw, unstoppable power they command. Heinrich plants his feet and, with an effortless shove, sends the Imperial prince stumbling backward. Klaus staggers back, disbelief blazing as he realizes the useless prince isn't all talk, he's a real fighter. Our boy sneered, "You really thought I'd be an easy stepping stone." The war dragon's eyes narrowed, weighing this new reality. He can only choke down his madness if there's a plan. Klaus scoffed, a cold grin curving his lips as he snapped, "Only a true master can change the tide of war." He slams his foot into the ground and roars that this power is a privilege reserved for him alone. Heinrich's gaze sharpened into a razor, daring the war dragon to bring it on. Klaus hoisted his colossal greatsword, its shadow swallowing the ground as he prepared to crush the so-called useless prince. He lashes out with a devastating swing, steel streaking like lightning and fury tearing through the air. Klaus's men freeze, jaws dropping, as Heinrich's defense lashes out with lightning speed and bone-shattering force. The Imperial Prince tosses aside brute force and rains a blistering flurry of razor-precise strikes. The eye-patched woman knows Klaus' magic has turned him into something beyond human, so how the hell is this kid still keeping up? The war dragon's eyes snapped wide, disbelief ripping through him at the sight before him. Heinrich isn't just defending, he's barreling forward, swallowing the distance and unleashing a fierce assault. The war dragon tore the sky apart with a blistering storm of strikes, claws and flames raking the air. Not a single blow found its mark. Heinrich's eyes were cold steel, his focus razor-sharp as he sliced through the onslaught, weaving between strikes with deadly grace. Klaus's eyes snap wide, his opponent wields magic designed only to dodge, slipping away from every strike. Is he just dodging the truth, or does Heinrich's gaze scream that something much bigger is at play? Imperial officers froze, mouths agape, disbelief burning in their eyes as the scene unfurled before them. In a heartbeat he turns the tables, charging forward as his own blade becomes a silver blur. He clamps the sword's hilt, pouring every ounce of his will into a savage counterstrike. Imperial soldiers' jaws drop as their legendary prince is driven backward. Heinrich Rower's bellows he's only getting started, you can tell someone's been holding back. He rips through Klaus' guard and bulldozes into the war dragon, tackling it in a reckless, heart-stopping collision. The war dragon's eyes snap wide in shock as a brutal strike hurls him off balance. Heinrich rips the Imperial Prince off his feet and sends him tumbling through dirt and snow. Klaus snaps his head up, stunned as his opponent streaks by with blinding speed. Heinrich is not finished. He catapults his sword, turning the blade into a lethal projectile. Klaus slams his arm up like a shield in one final, desperate bid to block the blade. The sword's tip slammed into his flesh and rebounded, a savage metallic clang tearing through the air. A single strike blasted Heinrich's weapon out of his hands and left him reeling. Skin of steel wasn't just a metaphor. He gapes at his hand, disbelief roaring as his strike collided with the opponent's unyielding, stone-hard body. Memory slammed into him. Rumor had it the war dragon's hide deflected every strike. Klaus shot to his feet, snarling that mere swords and guns meant nothing against him. Heinrich sneers, branding the war dragon a mere flashy lizard. Klaus forces a short laugh, admitting Heinrich's skill caught him off guard, but he squares his shoulders, rock solid in the belief his defense will hold. He roars that even with this surprise thrown at him, defeat is impossible. Not a single outcome lets him lose this duel. Klaus dissects Heinrich's fighting style and sneers. It's all blinding speed with no knockout power to back it up. Heinrich's grin goes feral as he leans in and taunts Klaus. You really think you can't be defeated? Heinrich snaps that they're at a stalemate, but a duel plays by its own brutal rules, not like a war. He thrusts his hand skyward, a wordless order that sends his men surging into motion. On the fortress walls, soldiers surged as one, cocking and shouldering their rifles. Massive artillery locks onto the Imperial Prince, barrels leveled dead on. Shadow floods the war dragon's face as he realizes this one-on-one chat has guests. Imperial officers screamed the alarm, panic ripping through them as they realized the prince was suddenly in deadly danger. The threat isn't battering the fortress, it's festering within their own ranks. Klaus is boxed in as his own soldiers level, their rifles straight at him. Across the field, Heinrich looms with twin swords, his trap snapping shut with perfect timing. He snarls that even the war dragon can't dodge a focused, relentless barrage forever. On the fortress walls, Heinrich's own men gaped, shock slamming into them as fiercely as it struck the enemy. Klaus snaps, you think a stalemate makes you the victor, Heinrich. Heinrich admits Klaus II is a one-man storm who can reshape the battlefield by himself. The war dragon's eyes snap open to the truth. If Heinrich attacks, his terrifying speed will tear the ranks apart and leave chaos and casualties in its wake. With his men's lives dangling by a thread, Klaus bellows one final ultimatum: surrender now. Heinrich's grin widens into a razor smile as he spits out a flat refusal to surrender. The war dragon's eyes narrowed to slits, decreeing it a bitter shame. Klaus rips the bluff wide open, thrusts a hand skyward, and barks for his men to charge. Heinrich stood motionless, a predatory grin tearing across his face as his eyes flared into an eerie, menacing glow. The Imperial Prince roared the command again, bracing for a hail of gunfire to end it. Time stalls for a breath, only silence answers him. Klaus whips around, his bravado finally cracking into raw confusion. Rage cracks his voice as he demands to know why his soldiers are disobeying a direct order. One Imperial soldier stares at his palm, where a strange magical sigil now glows. Their fingers locked on the triggers, refusing to fire. Heinrich's trick was far more complex than just pointing guns. Klaus's aide barks confirmation. Their weapons and magic are sealed shut. The war dragon can only rasp a strangled, broken cry of disbelief. His shot explodes into a wild, manic laugh. This is the best fight he's had in ages. Heinrich sneers, feigning an apology for not launching an all-out attack sooner. A devilish grin rips across his face as he bellows. The real show is only getting started. Klaus thundered, "What kind of trickery is this?" Heinrich, calm as ice, answered his enemy's question about where the fool is, his voice flat and precise as he revealed the fool's hiding place. He grins, offers a rare exception to reveal the truth, and the hungry gleam in his eyes shows he's enjoying this far too much. The Imperial Prince goes silent, frozen as the final piece snaps into place. Heinrich leans in and spits out his old verdict: "You're just fast, nothing more." Klaus's eyes lock on a freak detail. Heinrich blazes by, yet his clothes scarcely stir. Heinrich snaps, smirking. He's not fast, everyone else is crawling in slow motion. The war dragon froze, jaws slack and eyes wide, its titanic mind short-circuiting at the impossible words. Only a stunned stare remained. He snaps that this isn't a physical ability, it's a conceptual power, a mastery of ideas. He reveals the truth, roaring that he's frozen time for everyone but himself. A terrifying grin ripped across his face. The act was finally and utterly finished. Klaus's voice collapses into a ragged stammer as the revelation shatters his composure. He thunders that if this is true, Heinrich's power can't be human. No kidding, Sherlock. Heinrich lunges forward, eyes blazing, and snaps. Does this power remind him of the Empire's very flame god? In that moment, the legendary war dragon's roar choked off as true fear clenched its heart. An invisible storm of power erupts from the young prince. His hair seemed to crackle, sparks snapping as an overwhelming energy surged through every strand. Heinrich's eyes snapped into razor focus, shedding the lazy, incompetent stare he'd always worn. They burn with the absolute ruler's ice-cold, merciless light. The pressure crushes Klaus. He slams his hands to his head, disbelief flaring across his face. He snapped his head up. There wasn't a prince at all, but a monster wearing a human face. Heinrich hoists a lone hand. Energy claws at the air around his fingertips as he prepares to unleash his true power. From across the battlefield, he steels himself, eyes blazing, ready to tear up this war's rulebook and write his own. A towering tidal wave of razor-edged ice blasts out of the frozen earth. Winter just slammed into the Empire early. The Imperial army is engulfed as impossible magic rips through their ranks, tearing them apart and shattering them to pieces. Klaus' face snaps into raw disbelief as the plot flips in a jaw-dropping instant. He jerks his head down and sees his feet clamped in a brutal prison of jagged ice. The legendary war dragon is frozen solid, pinned in ice so it can't even twitch. He roars, a savage fury ripping through him, as his superhuman strength shatters uselessly against the magic. Chaos rips through the Imperial ranks as trapped soldiers scramble, terror clawing at their throats. Horror pins Klaus to the spot as his so-called invincible army collapses one by one, neutralized right before his eyes. The entire battlefield slammed to a standstill, thousands of soldiers frozen in a single instant. The Imperial Prince reels, disbelief clawing at him. He can't fathom this. His easy victory lies in ruins. Across the field, Heinrich stands, stone-cold and steady, the calm eye of the storm he tore into being. A wicked grin tore across his face as he drank in the war dragon's despair. Klaus's jaw drops as realization rips through him. This is the raw power of a magic god, a living legend. Heinrich plants one deliberate step and claims the frozen, silent battlefield as his own. The war dragon can only grit his teeth, rage boiling yet utterly impotent before this absolute power. Heinrich loomed over him, sneering. So, how does it feel now that the roles are reversed? Klaus roars that the war's spiraled into utter catastrophe, and he owns every ruin he's unleashed. Our boy flashes a sharkish grin, lines in, and dares to map out the future now that he has Klaus's full attention. Even crushed by defeat, Klaus roared that if he must die, his men must be spared. Heinrich sinks into a chair, smirks, and tells the prince he's jumping the gun. He flicked the air dismissively, reducing the legendary war dragon to a sulking child. Back at the fortress, a soldier crashes to his knees as an otherworldly light surges around him. A soldier hoists a plain flag aloft, a bold signal ripping the silence and demanding a parley. Klaus's eyes snapped open in shock, a flag of negotiation unfurled. Heinrich sneers, goading him. Do you really have the power to say no? The war dragon froze, eyes locked as humiliation hammered his thoughts into chaos. His frustration detonates into a silent, disbelieving scream that rips through his chest. A savage grin tears across Heinrich's face. The hunter has become the prey. Ice locks the battlefield in silence as the victor slams the terms of surrender into place. Later, Heinrich finally admits he never intended to unleash that over-the-top stunt. The commander admits he nearly crumpled when he grasped the prince's true power, a god of magic standing among them. Who would have guessed? Heinrich snarls he'd sworn to bury his power forever, and he'll never forgive the commander for yanking him into the light. He reveals that, as the prince of a doomed nation, his hands were tied, he had no power to negotiate. With a lazy shrug and a predator's grin, he told the defeated war dragon that his terms should now be acceptable. The commander stood silent, tasting the empire's ruin. They'd gone up against a god who smashed their armies in weaponized words to outwit every mind. He erupts into a brief meltdown, blaming his cursed luck for conjuring this monstrous calamity. He scoffs and grins, insisting he's just a timid man craving a quiet life. Sure you are, buddy. Heinrich's face hardened into a mask of icy contempt, utterly unimpressed by the performance. He feels it in his bones. Whether a god of magic or a crowned lord, the crushing weight of duty is the same. A small, confident smile snaps back onto his face. He embraces his new reality. Negotiations over, Heinrich strides alone across the battlefield's dead silence. The commander plants a steadying hand on his shoulder, a silent vow of support. The eye-patched woman proclaims the preparations are complete and everything's set to welcome a magic god. In the heart of the imperial camp, soldiers ring a massive tent, weapons gleaming and eyes locked like steel. She snarled that she'd dragged Heinrich to meet the empire's own magic god, Ludo. Inside, a spiky-haired man draped in a fur-collared cape waits, coiled like a spring, and daring them to step through the door. Heinrich's breath caught as he drank in the opulent surroundings. This was a palace compared to any military tent. His gaze slams onto an ornate tapestry draped across the wall. Ludo proclaims the tent is reserved for special guests, marking Heinrich unmistakably as one. He roars that the empire bows only to strength and bends deepest before a fellow magic god. Ludo leans in, eyes alight. Has the empire's legendary flame god set its blazing gaze on Heinrich yet? Heinrich scoffs, fury coiling in his chest, as he wonders why this man is feeding state secrets straight to the enemy. Ludo revealed the flame god's bloodline has served the empire for generations, tightening its grip on the nobility. Heinrich's memory snaps to the blazing image of this legendary flame god, a woman. His jaw drops. She's over 300 years old. Another apostle has already lived 150 years. Immortality threads through them all. Lessons over, Ludo snaps to action, jaw clenching as he dives straight into business. His smile snapped shut, his face hardening. The pleasantries were over. He steps forward and thunders the empire's demands into the negotiation. Heinrich snaps him silent and lays down his terms, every word laced with cold, unshakable confidence. Ludo's eyes slitted as he let the prince's audacious demand land, every thought snapping into razor-sharp focus. He stares at the Rand Kingdom's banner, voice cracking as he admits they were fools who sparked this war. Ludo nods, conceding, then snaps that his authority stops at negotiating a ceasefire agreement. Ludo snaps that only the emperor's judgment can seal a formal peace treaty. Heinrich's reassurance sliced through the tension. I'm not asking for a full treaty. The imperial magic god recoiled, thunderstruck by the prince's chillingly odd reply. He roars, demanding why Heinrich won't wield his power to secure a real, lasting peace. Heinrich shatters the silence with a confession. He only wants a ceasefire because he's planning to surrender. Ludo exploded into a raw, incredulous shout, disbelief ripping through him at the sudden declaration. His subordinates went stone still. The eye-patch woman clamped a hand over her mouth, trying to choke back her shock. He exploded, demanding to know why a man with that much power would just surrender. It hits him like an explosion. Heinrich had planned to surrender from the very start. Heinrich snarls he won't lift a finger for the Rand Kingdom. Handing a god of magic to those fools would unleash pure catastrophe, and you can't really argue with that. Ludo corners him, voice razor-sharp, demanding, if you took control of the kingdom, what would you do? Heinrich shrugs, admitting he'll be forced to wade through a tedious maze of internal politics. He snarls that surrendering to the empire would only saddle us with another nation's problems. Ludo slams the table, fury erupting as the prince shrugs off his own destiny like it's nothing. The text foreshadows the magic god's power surging into another nation, an outcome no one can stop. Heinrich lifted his teacup with icy calm, sipped, and shrugged, calling his efforts nothing more than a simple tax payment for the trouble he'd caused. Ludo explodes, declaring no man can simply abandon his homeland. He knew that the moment Heinrich surrendered, his own people would slam the label traitor onto him. Heinrich gapes, genuine bewilderment cracking his voice as he asks, "Was saving my men the wrong call, even if it doomed the kingdom?" A sly, knowing smile flickers across his face as he owns up to being a twisted man. "I grin, no arguments here, buddy." Ink slashes across the page as the Empire and the Rand Kingdom slam their signatures on a ceasefire agreement. News of the truth exploded across the land, and a fragile peace took wing. At the Empire's core, the Emperor snatches the report into his hands. He grinned, intrigue igniting as Klaus's letter announced the arrival of a third magic god. A young princess, Lisa Lott, can only gape, frozen and speechless, disbelief roaring through her as the news crashes over her. But a masked, mysterious woman leans forward, amusement flickering in her eyes. She's utterly entertained. Her wicked grin dares the world. Things are about to get a whole lot more interesting. Back in his quarters, Heinrich staggers in and collapses onto the bunk, seizing a hard-won breath of peace after the ordeal. He and his men holed up in a makeshift camp, guns silent and nerves taut. The war had paused for now. He spells out the agreement's terms, the first step in his grand, twisted plan. Heinrich sweeps the ranks and finds his men utterly dejected, their spirits crushed and staring at the ground. The commander snaps that they're still reeling from his surrender, scrambling to digest the blow. A rookie freezes, eyes wide, and utterly baffled by his leader's decision. Heinrich snapped, barking that they should accept the situation and move on. A real people person, this guy. Outside, even the guards are up in arms, roaring that their loyalty has been betrayed. Heinrich scoffs, snapping their concerns aside, furious that the Empire now hangs on his every move. The commander barked, did those negotiations succeed at all? Heinrich slams a question into the room. If a magic god just sold himself out, what would you do? One soldier bristles, refusing to be fooled. He smells a deeper plan lurking beneath the surface. Heinrich leans back and concedes the vibes shockingly friendly, all because the second prince took control with calm, capable precision. He roars that the Empire's only winning move is to throw everything at getting him completely on their side. They'll dangle every prize he could crave, prestige, mountains of money, and a parade of women at his feet. His men can only gape, scrambling to grasp this new political reality. The promise of riches and gorgeous women sends them leaping aboard without a second thought. Heinrich snaps instantly, calling them out for daydreaming, and they splutter embarrassed denials. He exhales a long, fed-up sigh and snaps that he despises the whole tedious circus of socializing. One soldier's grin turns wolfish as he insists the women would at least be a welcome perk. Heinrich snapped his head back in disgust. He was done with his perverted subordinates. He snaps, "You're missing the point completely." He thundered that the strongest chain isn't gold, it's the iron grip of emotion. His men recoil in horror as he unmasks the icy political calculus that turns family ties into weapons. He sneers, "A noble wife's the tightest shackle." The bond meant to protect him twists into his weakness, the perfect leash to bend him to their will. He snaps at his men, barking for their praise, and they bristle, baffled and annoyed. The next day, Heinrich is ushered into sumptuous quarters deep within the imperial camp. A cavernous yawn rips from him as he collapses into the hard-earned, well-deserved rest. He rockets upright in the lavish bed, grinning as he declares he's never slept better. He lunges and snatches the pitcher of water off the nightstand. He tilts the bottle, amber liquid sloshing into the glass, the first peace he's felt in days. A smug grin splits his face as he basks in the perfect life he's always craved. A voice from the doorway shatters the comfortable silence. Klaus the War Dragon himself thundered into the room and growled, "Heinrich, what do you need?" Heinrich insists he only wanted to pin down a few details with the prince. He snaps that he hasn't heard a single whisper of any guard deserting their post. Sprawled on the bed, he flashes Klaus a lazy grin and swears he won't bolt. Klaus flashes a grin and assures him, "Don't worry, you're free to roam anywhere you please." Confusion claws at Heinrich. Could he have always been living like this, even back home? The imperial prince recoiled, jaw dropping at the strange, offhand question. Klaus spots Heinrich's routine, holed up indoors, buried in books and dozing through the days, a life utterly unfit for royalty. He snarls, with that kind of laziness, no wonder they called him incompetent, and sure enough, our boy's reputation is already racing ahead of him. Klaus staggers, disbelief clawing at him, as his mighty army collapses before a single man. He still sees Ludo's jaw drop. The realization slams into him. They'd both misjudged the prince. The war dragon chokes, tongue-tied, barely croaking a request for a cup of water, imperial dignity shattered. Klaus snaps to business and booms that he's brought someone to introduce. A young woman slips into the room, silence clinging to her as every movement lands with measured, deliberate purpose. She strides forward and proclaims, Azur Mirheirum print, her gaze steady and impeccably polite. Heinrich's mind snapped into focus, ripping the Empire's flimsy disguise wide open in a heartbeat. It hits him like a punch. She's not a caretaker. She's a high-class spy planted to watch his every move. Heinrich barely gets a moment to stew over his new babysitter when Klaus barges in with more to say. The war dragon roars that a reply has finally arrived from the imperial capital. Heinrich's grin blazes as he snaps, finally, I get to read their response. Back in the Rand Kingdom, a howl tore through the halls as someone screamed, demanding to know who would take responsibility. Inside the royal court, the king's council has descended into chaos, voices bellow, and accusing fingers jab at every face. A panicked official's voice cracks as they scream, the imperial army is right outside our gates. The military general thundered back, slamming his hand down and barking, hold your tongue. He bellows the capital's ramparts will hold them until reinforcements arrive. The official snaps back, eyes blazing, and hurls the million-dollar question at them, what reinforcements? The general spins away and passes the buck, insisting this mess belongs to the civil servants, not the military. His bravado cracks, his face a silent scream of utter frustration, the very face of competence. At last the king himself, Rand of the Eighth, rose and barked them into silence. This is no place for debate. The king of Rand roared for a solution, cutting through his council's relentless bickering. An official slams his hand down like a gavel, roaring that surrender is their only option. Another voice throws out a desperate plan, hold the castle and beg foreign powers for aid. Their forces lie crushed, and a desperate question rips through the smoke, how do we get help? The general pushes to dispatch Crown Prince Edward as an envoy. The Crown Prince lies bedridden, still reeling after cheating death himself, so that brilliant plan just blew up. Chaos rips through the council. Their only move left is a desperate, suicidal last stand. At last the king's patience snapped, his face crumpled into hollow exhaustion. He spots the imperial army frozen in their tracks, and they snatch a single heartbeat to catch their breath. The king swept out of the throne room, ditching his useless council to rot in their own incompetence. He stalks off, hissing the imperial magic god's name under his breath. The king's eyes blaze. He knows even a worthless pawn can be hurled into the breach to snatch a few precious seconds. A bright-eyed young man bursts into the new city, jaw dropping as he drinks in the dazzling skyline. He's slammed into the empire's beating heart, a vast, dazzling capital that sprawls to the horizon. He edges around the corner and devours the scene, a curious grin splitting his face. He strides the riverbank, every ripple igniting memories of the brutal journey that hurled him into this strange new land. He staggers back as a living sea of bodies swallows the streets, proof of the Empire's iron grip. He wonders, jaw clenched, how they orchestrated an invasion across such a vast territory. Elsewhere, an official smugly proclaims the Empire runs every message through carrier pigeons. Carrier pigeons, seriously, that's their so-called cutting-edge tech. His companion urges that if Ludo invents a better method, he'll be richly rewarded, sighs that it's a shame, but the traveler has already made up his mind. The carriage wheel thundered on, hauling him deeper into the Empire's pulsing heart. The young man locks his gaze ahead, his jaw clamping shut as a silent, iron resolve roots itself in him. Through the window, he watches a guard devour a dispatch, a single pawn in a sprawling game. Meanwhile, Heinrich tests his new attendant, pressing Azur to reveal exactly what she knows is coming next. She slips into her role like a second skin, smiling politely as she fires off a crisp, unshakable no. Silence slammed into Heinrich as he picked apart her carefully crafted non-answer. A razor grin splits his face as he snaps, it's time to make a real gamble. They're charging straight for the Imperial Palace, a gargantuan castle that rips the breath from your lungs. A carriage thunders to a halt at the grand entrance as trumpets and heralds proclaim its arrival. Heinrich leapt from the carriage, at last standing beneath the towering gates of the Imperial Palace. The sight before him slams into him and rips the words right out of his mouth. He staggers backward, almost crumpling, as the crowd's reception hits him like a gut punch. A young princess stood resolute before him, flanked by an honor guard of soldiers and maids. The imperial soldiers freeze into stone sentinels, silent and towering, their presence a cold, imposing welcome. The maids froze like marble, their expressions shuttered and unreadable. What a warm reception. Heinrich froze, jaw slack and eyes wide, his brain scrambling to process that ridiculously formal greeting. The princess flashes a cold, regal smile and ceremonially ushers the ice magic god into her home. Her voice sliced through the silence. I am Lyslot Clamfrusel, sent by the emperor himself. Pure, innocent delight explodes across her face, clashing with the guard's cold, unyielding stares. She flashes a warm smile, wiping away every clue that political games are being played. One of his men cracks a grin and ribs Heinrich about his new, refined look. Heinrich fires a razor-dry retort, his face flat and unmistakably unimpressed. They were plunged into absolute extravagance, luxury so lavish it stole the breath from their lungs. Elsewhere, the Empire's magic god Ludo is flanked by armored guards as they march him through the palace. Heinrich and his commander are paraded through gilded halls, welcomed like guests into a hungry lion's den. Ludo is swept through the palace gardens, an oasis of serene beauty where every petal seems to whisper secrets. A young woman paces the marble steps of the grand conservatory, eyes locked on the gate as she waits for him. Ludo froze, eyes wide, the sight of his host hitting him like a thunderbolt. Princess Lyslot unleashes a warm, disarming smile straight at him. In an instant, the Empire's magic god crashes to one knee, head bowed in fierce respect. He bursts into thanks, his voice ringing with gratitude for the honor of this meeting. Ludo shoots a quick apology for not giving a proper greeting the first time they met. Her eyes snapped wide, genuine surprise shredding her composure as his formal apology landed. She snaps for him to rise, declaring a magic god's status absolute. Even royalty must bow to living legends. Soon they're sharing tea. The princess confesses she was stunned by his unexpected deference. Lieselot's voice crackles with gratitude as he thanks him for showing such respect, even to the war dragon's sister. Ludo snaps that on the battlefield, he'd never dare address royalty so freely. The princess thunders that in the Empire, the magic god reigns with absolute, untouchable authority. Her gaze sharpened into a blade, slicing through the polite conversation. She corners him, voice razor-sharp as she fires. Aren't you worried about being deceived? Ludo lays out his caution. A magic god could obliterate a nation in a flash, so giving a little respect is a tiny price to pay. Lisa Lutz cracks a grin and concedes he's every bit as clever as the rumors promised. She dares him to tear off the formal mask and show her who he really is. Ludo freezes, eyes glued to his teacup, utterly baffled by her strange request. The princess smirks and teases him to relax. She's heard he's usually way more casual than this. They sit opposite each other, smiles frozen into masks, the flawless tableau of polite society. Awkwardness slams into Ludo, and he squirms, every nerve screaming to disappear. Princess Lyslot wields a razor-sharp mind and dazzling talent. That gentle smile conceals a bottomless ocean of secrets, an abyss that swallows light. Ludo's breath catches. How many monsters does this empire hide? He forces a rigid, formal mask, snapping that acting any other way would be utterly improper. The princess lashes out, voice razor-sharp. Are you just toying with me? Ludo forces a brittle smile, blindsided. This sort of royal throws him off his game. Finally, he flings his hands up and buries them at his feet, dropping the stiff formalities. Lieselot erupts into a triumphant grin and gushes thanks. He finally said yes to her request. She grins and dares him, call me Lisa Lot, or even just Lisa, and Ludo squirms, awkwardness written all over him. The princess flashes a grin that dares him to ditch his stiff royal protocol. Ludo balks at just calling her by that nickname. This royal's playing a completely different game. He concedes her personality upended everything he expected, swallows his surprise, and accepts her praise. Lieselot watches the rumors about him unravel the moment they're measured against the truth. Ludo owns up to being just a regular man. Heinrich, though, kept his true power locked away behind a calm mask. He still remembers Heinrich outwitting the Empire's finest, then unleashing his full, devastating power at the exact moment. The princess swears, voice steady and fierce, that she respects him for exactly who he is. Ludo staggers, blurting that he assumed she was only teasing him. Lisa Lot beams warmly and beckons everyone to carry on their pleasant little tea party. Ludo pushed a brittle grin onto his face, jaw tight, and capitulated to the princess's strange request. Dawn tore across the imperial capital. A new game was about to begin. Inside the grand imperial palace, the bells thunder, summoning everyone to a historic meeting. The entire city seems to hold its breath, oblivious as political gears churn in the shadows. Heinrich's eyes narrow to slits, his mind laser-focused on the gamble he's about to make. He plants one resolute step forward, spine straight and eyes locked, ready to meet fate head-on. An ornate door towers before him, its threshold daring him to step through and seize the new future waiting on the other side. Augard thundered his name as he presented the ice magic god to the court. The massive doors thundered open, slamming a hall drenched in blinding light into view. Heinrich stormed into the cavernous chamber, a lone prince stepping straight into the lion's den. He strides down the long path to the throne as the imperial court's gaze sears him. Brooding on that throne is the ruler of this land, Emperor Friedrich of the Feusel Empire. He's not alone. Beside him, a woman plants herself, silent and towering, an imposing presence. Blazing contempt poured off her, raw and unmistakable. The legendary flame god Acacia looms there, flames whipping around her as fury scorches her face. She hates having company. Heinrich pinned them with a stare, his face a sealed vault that betrayed nothing. First to shatter the silence, the Emperor rises and thunders. A new god of magic has arrived. Heinrich zeroes in on the lack of formal etiquette, obvious bait meant to test how he'll react. He straightens, jaw hardening. There's no need to kneel. A god doesn't bow to a king. He accepted the Emperor's casual nod with a razor-sharp grin, every muscle coiled, ready to play the game. The Emperor weighed Heinrich's bold stance, a low, thoughtful hum rumbling in his chest. He bellows, "At last, now we can have a proper discussion." The Emperor confesses, breathless, he never imagined he'd live long enough to witness a new magic god. Heinrich swallows a grin and feigns wide-eyed shock as he's escorted into a royal audience. Whispers explode through the imperial court as they bargain with a defeated prince, shock etched on every face. Heinrich stands stunned, realizing his arrival ripped the entire war apart. He smirks, confessing he's puppeteered the empire to this very moment. The Emperor cut straight to the heart of it and thundered, "What do you truly want, Prince?" Heinrich's eyes hardened to steel as the fate of nations balanced on the single sentence he was about to unleash. His answer won't merely shape the empire's future, it will forge the fate of the entire continent. Heinrich roared that his intentions hadn't budged and that he held two wishes. First, he slams down an ironclad demand: guarantee the lives and livelihoods of him and every man under his command. Second, he roars that the loyal men who followed him be crowned heroes of the nation. The Emperor paused, weighing the moment, his gaze locking on the prince's fierce protectiveness of his subordinate's honor. Heinrich plants his boots and refuses to yield, his resolve a hardened core against the imperial court's crushing weight. The Emperor smirks, amused by the modest demands of course, from a man who can have anything. A wide grin splits his face as he accepts the terms and vows to grant Heinrich's every wish. Heinrich reels, almost speechless, as the Emperor fires off a brisk, sunny acceptance. He drops into a crisp, formal bow, gratitude roaring for the Emperor's decision, and the deal is sealed. As Heinrich turns, the Emperor's true thoughts explode into the open. Letting a magic god escape was never an option. The Emperor's words hit like cold steel. "Don't worry," his face a carved mask that gives nothing away. Heinrich admits he can't bend himself to a life of iron discipline. The court buzzed with whispers, gazes razor-sharp, as they damned the new magic god for what looked like a crude request. A razor-sharp, knowing grin carved itself across the Emperor's face. He burst into laughter, lavishing praise on the boy's sudden flair for the finer things. "Okay, Your Highness." Heinrich's features snapped shut like a storm cloud. He'd warned them this would happen. He knows that even with the empire defeated, the theocracy still looms, hungry, ruthless, and ready to strike. He never imagined he'd carve out an opening by weaponizing his own subordinate's stubbornness. With a thunderous formal decree, the Emperor proclaims the empire will accept the magic god of Rand. The flame god snaps in, roaring for the Emperor to mind his tongue right there, before the whole forum. The Emperor snapped, cutting Acacia off with icy finality. Heinrich now belongs to the empire. The flame god merely grins, shoots back that his tone is grating, and orders him to knock it off. She insists she's only obeying the strict etiquette the occasion demands. Heinrich barked that the public audience was over. The real meeting can begin now. Confusion crackled through Ludo as he bristled, eyes sharp, wondering who'd had the nerve to issue that unofficial order. The whole court froze, faces blank, and tension knotted the air, refusing to snap. Ludo spat a low curse under his breath, rage coiling as he was yanked into this gaudy political theater. Acacia's grin sharpened into a predator's snarl as she proclaimed this place the domain of the magic gods, and just like that, the scene detonated. Ludo stands frozen, watching his face harden into a cold mask of rising dread. Acacia stormed off, venom lacing her words as she ripped into the creepy farce she'd been forced to take part in. Acacia's smirk sharpens as she proclaims in cold, formal tones, "I am the legendary flame god." The emperor explodes, fuming that she just branded him a brat and sneered, "Old hag, respect your elders." What a joke. Heinrich forces a stiff, formal tone, but Acacia smirks and brushes him off like he's just background noise. She shoves aside the pleasantries and snarls, "Speak plainly, this is off the record." Our boy freezes, breath stolen, as the flame god's abrasive nature slams into him like a scorching sandstorm. Acacia's gaze snaps away, her face hardening into a cold mask. Her eyes snap to Ludo, and her smile curdles into a horrifying, unhinged grin. Terror ripped through Ludo's eyes as the flame god fixed its blazing gaze on him. The air crackles as a sudden, crushing pressure slams down. Heinrich leaned in, eyes razor-sharp, watching the Empire's planted bear spill its true power plays. Acacia locks eyes with Ludo, the two magic gods frozen in a knife-edge, wordless standoff. Her smile drips contempt as she feeds on the fear she provokes. Ludo grits his teeth and snaps. Was that intimidating display really necessary? She flashes a fake apology, smirking to show his opinion means nothing to her. Her eyes blaze with madness as she snaps. This is exactly why they're here. Heinrich watched in deadly silence, his mind a razor, slicing through every possible outcome. The pressure clenches like a vice, making even the Empire's most battle-hardened officials tremble. The Emperor sat like a statue on his throne, his face a stone mask, stern and unreadable. Heinrich's gut clenched. Was the Emperor really going to let this happen? The god's magic aura crushes everyone in the room, turning the air into a battlefield of resolve. This isn't about words, it's about who cracks first. Ludo grinds his teeth and snaps that he's already offered his submission. Acacia's razor gaze bored into him. She wasn't fooled for a second. A cold jolt hits him. She still thinks he's holding back, just playing politics. She roared that this crushing, all-consuming pressure is the true path of the magic gods. Court officials quake, their gilded titles collapsing to dust where rank holds no power. Stand before them, and every fortune and title shatters into dust. Under a god's unblinking gaze, mortals shrink into ants, scurrying across the vast earth. Ludo snaps he understands, and urges her to finally stop this display. She fires back, "You don't understand a thing." He flunked the pop quiz. She drops the bomb. The whole meeting was staged to hammer two crucial lessons into him. Ludo can only stare back, her lecture crashing into him and leaving him utterly adrift. Her opening lesson slams into the room, how a magic god must bear themselves within the Empire. She snarls that he has no arrogance or dignity, he's just far too nice for the job. She snaps that his usual polite demeanor is the exact opposite of how he should act. She snaps a god does not bow, they must be revered, not merely respected. She warns that his humility is tearing the Empire's power structure apart at its very foundation. Heinrich listens, a slow understanding unfurling across his face. Power doesn't have to play nice. A magic god is a world-shattering force that can obliterate nations and looms above every mortal rank and title. She explains, if a god feigns meekness, fools will pounce, scenting weakness and rushing to exploit them. She declares a single misunderstanding can light a fuse that detonates into full-blown civil war. She snarls that no crown, no royal decree can ever force a god to obey. Truth slams into Heinrich. The gods of magic don't serve the throne, they bend the knee to the man who sits on it. He's only mortal, yet his throne embodies the pact itself. A sorceress god bends the knee for no one, only to the one they choose to follow. She roared that single, absolute loyalty is the Empire's unshakable core, a brutally simple, terrifyingly effective system. She stands unbowed as the oldest, most loyal subject, her steady strength the bedrock of their nation. They've enthroned their power as a living god, never a weapon of war, always a sacred relic. A magic god carves their crown across a lifetime, forging a legacy of absolute authority. Realization slammed into Ludo, his eyes flying wide as he declared the system brilliant. With the first lesson over, Acacia's thoughts sprint straight to the second. She's an ancient political monster, the Empire's real ruler, a shadowy force pulling every string behind the throne. Acacia thundered that Ludo would now learn the true way a magic god must exist here. Ludo fumbles the living legend's name, heart racing as they scramble for the perfect way to address her. The flame god grins, savoring every second of their absolute, soul-crushing discomfort. She snaps that this is the perfect moment to snuff out any flicker of chaos before it can even ignite. Ludo reels as she drops the bomb. The second lesson is going to be hands-on. She warns, voice like thunder, if Heinrich throws his weight behind them, the continent's political map will be redrawn. The map throws down their greatest rival, the Romus theocracy, a nation whose power matches theirs blow for blow. Ludo roars that a new magic god backing the empire will drag the theocracy into action. Akashia agrees, a razor grin carving his face as the game's pattern finally snaps into focus. The scales that once balanced power have tipped violently, slamming into the empire's favor. Akashia snarls a warning. The theocracy is about to launch a desperate, reckless gambit. She proclaims an inescapable war is coming, a cataclysm that will shake the continent to its core. At the heart of that conflict will rise the champion of the theocracies, Apostle Stark. Ludo drank in the words, jaw locking and features hardening, as the weight of this new reality slammed into him. Stark roars to life as the theocracy's ultimate weapon, a force that stands toe-to-toe with Akashia. He forges ordinary men into an unstoppable legion of superhuman warriors. Yeah, totally fair, right? Akashia snarls that the moment war erupts, Ludo will be unleashed to meet him head-on. Ludo clenches his jaw, admitting with cold certainty that he's fully aware of his duty. Akashia's smirk widened as she snapped. That's why this lesson is necessary. Ludo's eyes snapped wide in horror as the meaning of her lesson crashed over him. Out of nowhere, Akashia tears the sky open and hurls a suffocating torrent of black energy. Her power devours the light, drowning the throne room in a suffocating shadow. Ludo's sight snaps as the world unravels and pours into her domain. He staggered. Her power had just completely rewritten his surroundings. Pinned and alone, he faces the flame god's crushing, infernal onslaught. In a heartbeat, Ludo unleashed a roaring burst of magic that slammed into the assault and drove it back. Perched on the sidelines, Heinrich tracked the exchange with ice-cold precision, every calculation burning behind his calm gaze. A towering wall of water explodes forward, slamming into Akashia's choking aura. Akashia smirks, conceding Ludo can muster a basic defense. He just passed the first pop quiz. Ludo howls, disbelief ripping from his throat as the crushing force reveals itself, the raw divine authority of a magic god. Akashia smirks, voice edged with triumph, and proclaims this power is the very wellspring of their magic. A lawless force that rips up every rule and hammers the user's will straight into reality. Ludo's gaze snapped cold, steel set in his features as he knew this was a war of will and spirit. The flame god roars that this authority's power swells with the fierceness of your will. He realizes he has to decipher every move of her assault and cleave a path straight through it. Its ego unleashed, warping reality until it kneels to your every desire. She roars that a magic god must be arrogant, their strength is the law. Ludo's eyes snapped open in terror as it hit him. She's about to unleash real magic in the throne room. She unleashes a blazing volley of fireballs, snarling that he must defend himself or he'll be seriously hurt. Class is now in session. Ludo can only stare as the brutal truth of the attack slams into him. Their power detonates into a shockwave that shudders through the imperial palace itself. The stone walls convulsed as a savage force tore free from deep inside. Elsewhere, maids shrieked as panic erupted, but Princess Liselot stepped forward like a rock, her cool voice slicing through the chaos and calming them. Her features snap into a grim mask. She already knows exactly what this conversation will demand. She watches, stunned, as a magic god's authority slams into the world with colossal force. Back in the throne room, Ludo feels divine authority crystallize the tighter he narrows his focus. Akashia grins, a razor-edged warning, do nothing and he'll be crushed before he can act. Ludo knows the moment he steps into her domain, it has no power to stop him. The flame god's grin explodes across his face. He's finally passed the test. Akashia snapped, this is the second stage. The simple phenomenon just morphed into a direct threat. This isn't a clash of wills anymore. It's a battle of manifested power raging through her domain. Ludo gaped, eyes wide with disbelief, as she conjured a staggering barrage of attacks. Understanding explodes through him, and he roars, a manifested authority won't vanish because you wish it. It must be fought. She explains every fireball can obliterate a castle and tears through the air faster than sound. Now that's one brutal pop quiz. Ludo scrambles for his life, diving and weaving as the throne room floor explodes into a storm of jagged stone. The imperial court stands gaping in stunned silence, terror seizing them as they realize they're hopelessly out of their depth. Ludo thundered, you fool, rage scorching the air at her for unleashing that power in the palace. He drives his feet into the floor like an iron anchor, every muscle coiled to shield not just himself, but everyone in the room. Ludo ripped open his magic, water tendrils snapping outward to shield the court. His magic rips through the air, dousing the fireballs and freezing each one mid-flight. Akashia's eyes flashed with admiration as she admitted he'd frozen her attack stone still, right inside her own domain. Ludo roars back, practically spitting that this reckless stunt is no great feat. She scoffed, smirking that her strike was nothing but a casual greeting he should have shrugged off. Ludo jabbed a finger at the trembling court, eyes gleaming as he reminded her she's about to level the throne room. The flame god flashes a smug, unconcerned smile, reveling in it. Madness twists her features as she snaps, calling him naive for thinking this is the full extent of her power. From the sidelines, Heinrich studies every move, a faint, calculating smile curling his lips. He's not just a spectator. He finally snaps, hurling the question at Akashia, "Is this really what you call guidance?" The flame god locks eyes with him, a challenging grin on his lips, and says, "Do as you please," a blatant, open invitation. Heinrich's eyes narrow into blades. He's not holding anything back. He makes one lightning-quick gesture, and his power erupts. Akashia goads him, snarling that standing by and watching isn't in his nature. An icy grin splits Heinrich's face as he bellows the name of his spell, Blizzard. A raging storm of ice and snow barrels toward the flame god, who, unfazed, tilts his head and asks, "What will you do next?" Ludo roars at Heinrich, a fierce warning slicing the air, "Don't underestimate me." Akashia's grin snaps into something manic as she hails his savage, untamed power. Heinrich shoots back a sly smirk and concedes, "Now this is finally getting interesting." The blizzard surges, an absolute zero torrent barreling straight for the Empire's heart. Caught off guard for the first time, Akashia reeled, blasted backward by the savage surge of his own magic. From the storm's heart, a lone shard of ice rockets out and hits its mark with deadly accuracy. Akashia's eyes snapped wide as recognition hit. This attack was an ice needle. Heinrich grins sneered, revealing the blizzard was nothing but a feint, a smokescreen for the raw, deadly force of his true power. He bellows that this lone, unstoppable needle will land the true killing blow. In a heartbeat, the needle hurtles forward and impales the flame god's forehead. Ludo froze, eyes wide, his brain short-circuiting at the sight of what had just happened. Akashia freezes mid-breath as a jagged shard of ice buries itself in her skull. Her body collapses, utterly limp, and panic detonates in Ludo's mind. Did he just kill her? Perched on his throne, the Emperor drank in the unfolding scene, barely ruffled. Only a faint, annoyed twist of his lips showed it bothered him. Heinrich watched with an icy stare and snapped that he'd warned her he wouldn't be holding back. Ludo's breath catches as he realizes a single brutal strike like that would have killed any ordinary person. He theorizes a magic god's body thrums with its own raw, unstoppable will. Their unique physiology twists magic into strange, explosive effects. He whirled to the flame god, eyes blazing, and fired the question that hung in the air. Was his hypothesis true? Akashia's eyes flash with awe as she asks if he's already mastered how to reinforce his own body. Ludo's eyes snapped wide. His guess had landed dead center. He confessed, voice cracking, that he'd never met another magic god, so it was only a theory. Akashia's smug grin slams the verdict down. Only one thing's coming. Her immortal body is untouchable. Only a magic god, unleashing every ounce of power, can actually wound her. Ludo broke into a cold sweat as the truth slammed home. She wasn't immortal, just brutally hard to kill. Court officials' whispers fracture into terrified stammers as their minds refuse to process gods locked in a savage deathmatch. When magic gods erupt into an all-out battle, victory means nothing, survival is everything. If a full-scale clash erupted, it would wipe nations from the map and snuff out all life across the continent. Even Akashia's legendary duel with Apostle Stark never erupted into a true, all-out clash. If she'd been dragged into a true deathmatch, it would have ripped the mask off her immortality and exposed it as just a title. Heinrich bristled. This ridiculous, over-the-top display had him seething. Akashia barks, time to move on to the next phase of the lesson. Terror exploded in Ludo's eyes as it hit him. The lesson was nowhere near finished. Out of nowhere, she unleashes a savage kick that shatters into his skull. Magical theory just got obliterated. The blow crashes into him with crushing force, hurling him off balance. A brutal strike launches Ludo through the air, slamming him into the throne room's far wall. Court officials freeze, eyes wide, forced to witness the raw, savage brutality unfolding before them. Akashia's menacing scowl snaps away, her features going slack with raw, wide-eyed surprise. Her leg lies sealed in ice, bones splintered by the savage recoil of her own attack. She smirked, amused, and taunted the sudden leap into brutal hand-to-hand combat. Ludo stands completely unharmed, shock exploding through him as he realizes the fierce resilience he actually possesses. Akashia's grin cuts the air as she admits she underestimated him and snaps, "What trick are you hiding?" From the sidelines, Heinrich demands he explain his power if this is truly a lesson. Ludo drops the bomb. He's frozen his body's exact state, locking it in place so it can never change. He freezes his coordinates, sealing himself adrift in the void, and the Emperor explodes into gleeful laughter. Akashia laughs, eyes alight. Ludo has forged his own kind of immortality. Even Heinrich staggers, jaw slack, gaping at the sheer ingenuity of Ludo's power. Akashia clapped her hands sharply, a single command that marked the end of the theoretical portion of the lesson. She plants herself across from Ludo, eyes blazing, and dares him, "You ready to continue our little spar?" The ice magic god and the flame god lock eyes, the true battle ignites. Akashia slams her boot into the ground and rockets forward at impossible speed. She rockets forward like a living bullet. Her close quarters strikes ripping dust into the air that snaps with every hit. The flame god blitzed across the gap and unleashed a brutal, up-close barrage of strikes, so much for a purely magical duel. Ludo stayed stone-cold calm, his gaze locked on her, tracing every move with laser-sharp precision. He slams his arm up to block a bone-crushing kick, every strike aimed to finish him. Ludo thundered that if not for his immutability, her bare-handed strike would have killed him. Akashia flashed a syrupy smile and tossed out an utterly fake apology. She reveals it's all been to steal him for the theocracy's champion, Apostle Stark. Ludo's breath catches as he watches Stark, no mere commander, but a frontline monster charging into battle and tearing through the ranks himself. Akashia seals the verdict. Stark's brutal one-on-one mastery is the true, far deadlier threat. She channels his style, unleashing a relentless onslaught forged by a warrior who enhanced himself. She became a blinding streak, the floor cracking beneath the brutal force of her speed. Stark commands crippling team-wide buffs and savage solo might, together they're a nightmare. Ludo's face snaps into stone, steam hissing off him as he braces for the next onslaught. His fist snaps shut as the nightmare of standing across from a god-tier brawler slams into him. Ludo hangs on every syllable, a lone bead of sweat sliding down to shatter the calm mask he's wearing. Akashia swallows his pride and admits Ludo utterly outclasses him in raw power and range. She explodes into laughter, crowing that without the immortality her flames grant, she'd have been killed long ago. She confesses even she couldn't absorb one of his full-power blows without paying a brutal price. Heinrich grins, picturing them tearing the world apart. If they truly clashed, the continent might not even survive. Akashia's lesson isn't over. Once Ludo's trapped, his defenses shatter. Like a chess match, trapped in check, he must unleash one bold move that flips the entire board. She plants her foot with a brutal stomp, the ground cracking under the sheer force of her next demonstration. She snaps that against Stark, dodging and casting spells, only buys a few breaths before the inevitable crashes down. Survival won't cut it. He must engineer a victory against the onslaught, and this lesson is turning into a merciless crucible. Akashia slams a hand over his face and snaps, "Close quarters combat isn't my hobby." Ludo reels, visibly shaken by her ferocious, painfully personal teaching style. She slams the simple truth into place. A fist is just a fist, until a god's fist turns into a weapon. Ludo squared his shoulders, every nerve coiling as he braced for whatever savage twist this brutal lesson throws next. Akashia leans in, grinning, and asks if he's annoyed, slamming his flashy duel with Klaus down like a gauntlet. She declares it had to be, a spectacle conjured by his magic alone. Heinrich dryly snaps that Ludo's close quarters skills barely meet a soldier's standard. The peanut gallery erupts with derisive cheers. Ludo remembers the instant he brought the war dragon to its knees with a single, earth-shattering magical strike. A magic god's authority rips those simple tricks to shreds. He must conquer this weakness now. The air trembles with heat as he braces and charges straight at the flame god's next lesson. Ludo's eyes snapped wide as the truth slammed into him. He hammers his fist into the floor, driving his power to its breaking point. Akashia reels, eyes wide as her jaw drops in raw, unmistakable shock. He exploded into a sprint, erasing the distance with a blistering burst of newfound speed. The flame god staggers, a thin trickle of blood betraying her surprise. The student is learning at breakneck speed. She snaps back in an instant, stomps the ground, and rips into a savage counterattack. Again, she tears forward like a human bullet, vanishing before the eye can follow. The flame god erupts into another furious onslaught of bone-shattering physical strikes. Heinrich stands at the sidelines, dissecting every move with a razor-sharp stare. Ludo clashes with her kick, each strike a lethal, fight-ending blow. Ludo bellowed that had he not been immutable, her bare-handed strike would have killed him. Acacia plastered on a sickly sweet grin and tossed out a cheerful apology dripping with total insincerity. She declares every brutal lesson is meant to harden him to face the theocracy's champion, Apostle Stark. Ludo scoffed, convinced Stark's power only bolstered his army. Acacia growls that his army is a threat, but Stark alone is far more terrifying. He ravenously pumps himself full of power, then barrels into the fray, yeah, real fair. Her foot grinds against the stone, a brutal testament to her godlike strength. Stark ignites the masses into power and tempers himself into an unstoppable force. Ludo's face hardens into stone as the truth of his next opponent crashes over him. He knots his hand into a vice as cold truth slams into him, the nightmare of facing a god-tier brawler. Ludo's gaze lasered onto the lesson, every muscle taut, the pressure carving lines across his face. Acacia keeps sizing him up and finally concedes. Ludo's raw offensive power utterly eclipses hers. She throws her head back, laughing, and snaps that only her immortality has kept her alive this long. She knows that if he unleashed his full strength, it would scorch them both to ruin, an absolute mutual stalemate. From the sidelines, Heinrich's blood runs cold. If they'd truly fought, a real clash would have wiped him out of existence. Acacia snaps to the point. Playing defense in tight quarters is a one-way ticket to defeat. She splashes a chessboard across the canvas like a battle map and snaps that when he's backed into a corner, he must unleash one game-changing move. She slams her foot down and steels herself to unleash the next brutal chapter of her lesson. She snaps that simply reacting to Stark's attacks is a one-way ticket to certain defeat. Ludo craned his neck, utterly dwarfed by the towering flame god as her blazing presence swallowed him and her words struck like thunder. Acacia slams a hand onto his face and snaps that close-quarters combat isn't his forte. The flame god froze for a heartbeat, sizing up his reaction while her face stayed an impenetrable mask. She lays out the simple logic, a fist is just a fist until a god hurls it. Ludo snaps into a fighting stance, resolve hardening into iron beneath her relentless tutelage. She smirks, fires a taunt, annoyed, then drags his flashy duel with Klaus into the spotlight. Ludo roared that it was a necessary performance, a daring act he could only pull off with magic. Heinrich deadpanned. Ludo's close-quarters skills barely hit soldier level. He remembers the duel with Klaus. He unleashed a cataclysm of magic and rode it straight to victory. Facing another magic god, his authority crumbles, a glaring weakness he must crush now. A wave of crackling energy tears through the air as Ludo steels himself for the next phase. Ludo's eyes narrow as a daring new strategy snaps into place while the battle rages around him. He met her next kick dead on. The impact ripped the floor apart beneath them. This time Acacia reels, jaw slack, absolutely floored by his defense. He's faster now. His counterattack explodes out and blindsides the flame god. A thin trickle of blood snakes down her cheek, betraying the shock. The student has finally drawn blood. They collide again, erupting into a blur of motion and raw, devastating power. Ludo knows he can't slow her. He must blast past every limit and accelerate. Acacia's eyes flash, blazing with calculation as his mind scrambles for any escape from this crushing checkmate. He counters in a heartbeat, unleashing a cataclysmic strike that slams square into the flame god's head. Her body splinters on impact, ripping the words from her throat, class dismissed. Ludo slams down his ultimate trump, an incandescent orb of pure, condensed magic. He rips it free. The throne room is swallowed whole by a towering pillar of light. Acacia's grin widens into a razor smile as she dares him, show me what you're truly capable of. Ludo roots himself in the storm's heart, his power erupting into a blinding, unstoppable display. The flame god fixes her gaze, amusement flickering out as genuine interest flares to life. From the light, a serpent of pure water surges into being. Acacia's eyes ignite as he seizes the truth. This is his true divine authority. Defense is over, he's charging up, ready to unleash his own monster. She snaps that this is the power he'll need to face the theocracy's Apostle Stark. Her smile snaps into a predator's grin. The real lesson is about to begin. The two gods roar, their thunder ripping the sky as their wills slam together in a last, wordless challenge. In an instant, their powers detonated, shuddering the palace to its very foundations. The titanic water serpent lunged, snaking its coils around the flame god in a blinding instant. Acacia is blindsided, swallowed whole by a torrential onslaught. The imperial court gapes as a battle explodes beyond mortal comprehension. Ludo thrusts his hand out, focus razor-sharp, and the water prison writhes under his command. He cages her inside a flawless sphere, a roiling wall of liquid with no escape. Ludo explains his technique. He locks the liquid inside a prison of stagnant air, rendering it utterly indestructible. Akashia slams her weight against the barrier. Every push meets ironclad resistance. It won't budge. From behind the bars she scoffs, ripping his so-called perfect trap apart as laughably naive. He still has a lot to learn. The Emperor's eyes snapped wide as the fatal flaw in Ludo's perfect prison hit him like a thunderclap. Akashia's voice exploded from inside, ripping through the silence and confirming his worst fear with one cold, unmistakable line. She warns you, you can't trap a flame with water. She'll scorch the water into steam and burn it all away. The sphere detonates into a blinding steam cloud, the shockwave hurling Ludo through the air. Ludo's eyes bulged with horror as his ultimate technique fizzled into a mere annoyance. He snaps back to his feet instantly, a new power roaring to life in the palm of his hand. Akashia's eyes went wide as his opponent's raw, unyielding tenacity slammed into him. He detonates a blinding flash of light, hurling everything into a desperate, all-or-nothing gambit. Two magic gods brace, power coiling in their palms, as the lesson's final phase snaps into motion. The imperial court stood paralyzed, jaws agape, as the battle exploded into chaos. Powerless, the Emperor can only watch as a lone bead of sweat races down his temple, exposing the shock clawing at him. Ludo slams his palm open, and a blinding light detonates outward, his final gambit. Akashia snaps at his sudden pause, demanding, "What are you trying to accomplish?" He snarls that he doesn't know Stark and refuses to twist himself into the monster she demands. He conjures a feint, an opening forged from raw, untamed instinct. He pauses, weighing his own bluff, and a cool, steady confidence settles into his bones. Akashia snaps, ripping into his cheekiness and daring him to defend his audacity. A slow, impressed smile bloomed across her face. She knew the kid had nailed the final exam. Steam finally peeled back as the destructive energy of their clash bled out and slipped into silence. Steam billowed from the windows outside, the lone testament that a divine storm was roaring within. Scars slash the throne room, but it stands unbroken, proof the god held back their wrath. Akashia smirks, boasting her fireballs could have leveled the castle, and she chooses who gets scorched. Even the Emperor admits the ordeal ripped the courage from his chest and left him trembling with bone-deep terror. Ludo glares, fury sparking as it hits him that the whole life-or-death lesson was just a cold, controlled experiment. He freezes, words ripped from his throat by the sheer audacity of it all. Akashia rips into the court, reminding them Ludo was trying to protect their sorry hides. The Emperor struggles to put into words the soul-crushing weight of a magic god's aura. Ludo snorted, sarcasm ripping through his voice. Anyone cute here who needs coddling. The imperial officials stood paralyzed, mouths agape, smoke still rising from the brutal roast that left them in stunned silence. He snaps at them to get a grip, snarling they're definitely not cute. What a brutal way to end a training session. Akashia roars that a clash of magic gods is a rare, priceless spectacle, a living legend you won't see twice. She raced to draw out his true power before the theocracy could strike, to watch exactly how he'd snap when driven to his absolute limit. Ludo snaps under his breath, irritation flaring as he realizes they've seen right through his polite mask. Akashia explodes into laughter, smirking as she admits she knew all along he was a little brat. She whirls to the Emperor and proposes they reward Ludo for his contributions. Ludo can only gape, utterly dumbfounded by the sudden, jaw-dropping flip in tone. The Emperor's assent cut through the room as he barked at Ludo, "Name your price for that valuable lesson." His face floods red, words stumbling as he confesses he has no real desires. Akashia snarls, "Don't you crave status or power?" He shuts her down cold with a single word, "Quiet." Ludo scoffs, insisting the title itself is reward enough. Akashia burns with frustration over his own lack of ambition, and the Emperor declares Akashia's reasoning rock solid. Ludo swears he craves no grand ambition, he only pleads that they consider his feelings. Akashia leans in, eyes blazing, slamming the question at him, "Can a wish that tiny really satisfy you?" The Emperor's grin widens, daring him to name his price. Ludo finally caves, confessing there's only one thing he wants. He slams down a vacation request, vowing to vanish until his power is truly needed, a god asking for paid time off. Later that night, they lifted 2 wine glasses and sealed a quiet, intimate toast. The Emperor sits with Heinrich, eyes hard as he relives how they won a prince and his band of hero rebels to their side. Heinrich's smirk sharpens as he taunts, "Doesn't the Emperor find this new arrangement rather pleasant?" Heinrich locked his gaze on the emperor and spoke to him directly, casual confidence smoldering in his eyes. The emperor leans in, drinking every word, a quiet, satisfied smile curling at his lips. Reality hits him like a punch. Heinrich's promotion puts them directly under his command. The emperor watches fate's wild twists, silently amazed at how quickly life can flip the script. Heinrich admits the journey's been brutal, and now he must steel himself to navigate the cold, rigid new formalities. He admits the stiff, formal air at the bar makes him squirm, but he accepts that it has to be that way. A long, relieved sigh rips from him as the crushing weight on his shoulders finally lifts. The emperor's eyes widened. Heinrich wore obligation like armor, not the arrogant swagger the emperor had been counting on. He slammed a single question at the young prince. After such a short life, what does he truly believe the Lord is? Heinrich says that from day one he's had to weaponize every scrap of his intellect just to stay alive. Heinrich sprawls on the couch, jaw tight, replaying the role the empire forced him into. He smirks, owning it. If he's a brat, he's terrifyingly effective. The emperor's voice slices the air. Has the young prince had too much to drink? Her rare candor stuns him and comes with a cold warning. Don't get too comfortable. Heinrich halts for a beat, thought carving a hard, pensive mask across his face. He drops the bomb. The magic god isn't human anymore, and alcohol doesn't affect him. The emperor leans in, listening, eyes locked on the boy. He's far more than he seems. The diagram rips the veil away, exposing a god's body that laughs at mortal limits, shrugging off age, poison, and disease. Heinrich drops a bomb. He's been using his power to freeze his body in a perfect youth stasis. Talk about the ultimate anti-aging cream. He grins, admitting he can't get drunk, but he still drinks in the tiny, perfect pleasure of the moment. The emperor's voice snaps. What a convenient constitution you have, Heinrich. He sneers at flattery and demands only a blunt, fair appraisal for a man like him. Heinrich confesses he was only blowing off steam. He never dreamed he'd be hurled onto a stage this colossal. His gaze knives into a slit. He knows, bone deep, he's crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. He'd seen them up close, and the truth slammed into him. The Empire's leadership is a den of monsters. Memory slams him back into the throne room, where Emperor Friedrich loomed, and the flame god Acacia burned like a living inferno. Behind them loomed the real heavyweights, faceless officials who pull the nation's strings. Perched at the very pinnacle, the Emperor looms, a man whose presence radiates the unshakable dignity of a true ruler. The magic god's aura slammed down like a tidal wave, and the court stared it down without so much as a twitch. Talk about a stone-faced, iron-hearted crowd. The emperor's eyes sliced through every facade and laid your very soul bare. His thoughts snapped to the flame god Acacia, that ancient blaze standing guard at the emperor's side. A being who bound themselves to the empire with an unbreakable oath, and why, no one can fathom it. Behind that smile, a calculating monster prowls, a guardian deity chained to the nation's very heart. She pulls the strings behind the throne, a living weapon that never needs to draw a blade. A magic god whose experience dwarfs his own, a being who rips reality apart without breaking a sweat. A cold alarm blares in him. Her past is forbidden territory, a boundary he swears he'll never cross. He swallows the truth. Against a true monster like her, any attempt to outmaneuver her dies before it starts. He knows lingering in this den of vipers is a one-way ticket to doom. Guess the welcome basket forgot the survival guide. The emperor's voice rips through his thoughts, snapping him to attention. Is something amiss? Heinrich scoffs, spitting a bitter truth. No one in that court can be trusted. He snaps that he wants nothing to do with any of them. He snarls that the world of politics is a den of monsters, and the empire looms at its very summit. The emperor might have locked down his vacation, yet he can feel those creatures circling. They won't give him a single moment of peace. They'll push him past his limits, sowing political time bombs that explode the instant he drops his guard. A battlefield of strategy unfolds. Read the board, then unleash an audacious, pinpoint strike. He muses, a magic god is a whole other breed of monster, one that towers over humanity. He realizes the only way to beat them is to don a fool's mask and slip past every trap they set. The emperor froze, jaw-dropping as a shockingly simple strategy landed on him with devastating, unexpected depth. Heinrich insists, proclaiming he's fighting tooth and nail for a vacation, a cause he swears is truly noble. He aches for one honest breather, to drop the crushing weight of the world and just be human for once. The emperor reels as Heinrich's blazing proclamation slams into him. Heinrich exhales, eyes shining, and admits this peace is something he'd only ever dared to dream. He stares at his hands, a map of jagged scars earned from a lifetime of brutal fights just to survive. Far away on the Empire's border, a new conflict has already ignited. Alone, the commander felt panic knot his gut as he forced himself to reckon how many of his men had already fallen. Flames devour the battlefield and explosions rip the sky. This is a savage, merciless war. On the front lines, soldiers dive, dodge, and sprint through a storm of chaos, desperate to survive. From the tree line, they spot their enemy looming, a silent, ominous force. The commander's gaze snapped to steel as the truth slammed into him. He knew exactly what he had to face. An impossibly vast army looms before them, a thunderous tide of steel and death. Their vacation just got obliterated. Two hands shot out, a desperate plea hurled at the onrushing storm. The battlefield erupts as a titanic blast rips through, swallowing soldiers whole. Chaos explodes around him as a young, dark-haired soldier grits his teeth, blood splattered across his face. He fights shoulder to shoulder with a blonde-haired comrade, their blades carving a desperate bulwark against the surging tide. The enemy's relentless spellstorm rips the earth open, cleaving the land into jagged, yawning chasms. The young soldier's eyes snapped wide, the frontline horror staring back from the depths of his gaze. Rage exploded from his comrade as he bellowed, "Don't get in the way of my blade." The dark-haired youth seizes command, barking orders for his men to launch a diversion. Looks like someone's got to be the bait. Blood plastered across his face, he roared the order to charge straight into death's gaping jaws. The blonde soldier slams his eyes shut, letting the bitter truth of their situation sink into his bones. Alone, the blonde commander slumps, every loss piling onto him like a boulder crushing his chest. He clings to the faces of his friends, men he drank with, ripped from his life and gone forever. Later, he drops down beside the dark-haired youth, and together they steal a rare, quiet moment of peace. He roars, pinning the war's true blame on the politicians who ignited it. He shouts that his unit and the prince they followed were the real victims. They deserved to be hailed. They unleashed the decisive strike that ended the war, driving their enemy to surrender. The young soldier leans in, eyes blazing, and demands to know if this means they must abandon the cause they once bled for. The commander shuts his eyes, a silent surrender that seals their new reality. He sits alone, thoughts exploding like lightning as he plots their next move. He knows the moment to strike for his comrades has come. Overhead, the sky yawns wide, just as hazy and uncharted as the future bearing down on them. The shot rockets into a grand city, serene boulevards and glittering towers, the very picture of peace and prosperity. The streets throb with life, a vibrant heartbeat glaring against the ruined, war-torn border. Citizens strode the cobblestone paths, their lives unscathed by the recent conflict. The city square roared with a heaving sea of people, living proof the empire's rule stood unshaken. Cutting through the crowd, the dark-haired youth from the front lines walks among them, every step carrying the weight of war. A sly grin splits his face as he declares, "I knew the capital would be exactly like this." He drinks in the teeming streets, shouting that the whole nation pulses with life. His peaceful observation explodes as a familiar voice cuts through the silence. The blonde commander barrels through the crowd, roaring, "Young master, that's a new development." He snaps at the youth for wandering off alone, exasperation crackling through every word. The frontline youth explodes in complaint. Heinrich, his companion, is late. They're undercover right now, slipping into the roles of a foreign merchant's son and his attendant. Heinrich scoffed, "Our sleepy little village is nothing, a speck beside the capital's jaw-dropping grandeur." He then leans in and snaps the question at his young master, "What's their official schedule for the day?" The youth sneered, hurling blockhead at him for burying himself in his work. He lets loose a thunderous sigh, utterly fed up with his subordinate's pompous, stiff demeanor. A lightning bolt idea hits him, and he vows to teach Heinrich how to actually have some fun. Heinrich nods, a spark in his eyes, and beckons them toward the city's livelier, buzzing streets. Elsewhere, a noble-looking man and a dark-haired woman galloped across the plains, hooves pounding like distant thunder. Back in the city, Heinrich presses a sizzling skewer of street food into his young master's hand. Lesson 1 begins. Heinrich proclaimed the street vendors swore this skewer was a local delicacy. He snaps that he should have fetched it himself. It's his duty as the attendant. The youth smirks, taunting him as he loses his cool over their flimsy cover story. He shrugs off the pompous lecture and chomps down on the food offered to him. He blinks in disbelief and admits it's shockingly tasty for street fare. Having crushed the first lesson and soaked up the fun, they surged onward. As they walked, a thief's hand shot out like a viper and snatched the youth's pouch. The young master snatches the pickpocket, then brushes him off with a bored wave, sneering that he's nothing but a petty criminal. Out of nowhere, a hulking man exploded into a bellow, feigning that someone had bumped into him. He and his accomplice swarm the kid, slinging accusations that he caused the injury. Huge mistake. They picked the wrong targets. The two thugs snap rigid as their swagger shatters and drains right out of them. Their leader sputters, eyes wild as the full horror of his terrible mistake crashes down on him. Cold sweat beads across their skin as their gaze locks onto the eyes of their intended victims. The youth issues a single, icy command to disappear. They bolt, scrambling away in blind panic. A sudden scream shreds the air and yanks his attention to the crowd. Those same thugs have zeroed in on an easy mark, and he snaps at Heinrich to storm in and shut them down. Heinrich storms in as the hero. The rescued woman squeezes out a trembling thank you, just another day for an undercover commander. The small commotion snuffed out, the day blasted forward. Heinrich laughs, declaring their little trip a non-stop thrill ride so far. The youth smirks, dubbing the encounter a first-class way to kill time. The young master spun, devouring the surroundings, and snapped at Heinrich, "Where have we ended up?" He freezes as the streets burst with a jaw-dropping flood of impeccably dressed youths. Luxury shops glitter on both sides as he snatches stray shards of technical jargon drifting through the crowd. Standing at a crossroads, he freezes, then the scattered pieces snap together in his mind. They crash through the gates of the prestigious Magic Academy. That low-key vacation died before it began. He steals his features, jaw clenching as the academic world finally clicks into place. Heinrich's pulse spiked as his master's sudden insight hooked him. Out of nowhere, the youth lunged and clamped his hand over his face, leaving him reeling. He barks at his attendant, reminding them they're supposed to be on a break. Heinrich can only choke back tears as his master rips into him for being too serious. He tilts his head and stares up at the Grand Academy as a spark of curiosity ignites in his eyes. He whirled away and snarled at Heinrich to bolt before the workbug sank its teeth into them. Surprise bolts through Heinrich as he snaps, "My master really has no interest in magic." The youth would be lying to say he's not burning with curiosity about the Empire's advanced magic. The Empire sent its scholars into tiny communities, unearthed their folk magic, and forged those humble rites into the Empire's towering sorcery. He reveals his power is the basic magic he learned back in his homeland. A whole field of knowledge loomed, utterly unexplored by the Empire's researchers. Now a temple devoted to that knowledge towers right before him. He snaps the idea away, vowing he won't be dragged back into work during his vacation. Even a prodigy needs a day off. Heinrich freezes, bewilderment flaring in his eyes as he can't fathom what his master is driving at. The youth's blood runs cold as he realizes they'd make his magic their ultimate research subject. He knows that if he reveals even a flicker of interest in their sorcery, they'd almost certainly swarm him, desperate to recruit him for their studies. Heinrich braced, expecting they'd ask him to replicate a magic god's power. Memory slams into the youth. Acushia, the flame god, has already been stripped of secrets and studied inside out. He whirls to Heinrich and snaps, "What do you know about the true cost of magic?" Heinrich snaps a nod, eyes blazing. He's clearly grasped the fundamental principles. He roars that magic siphons mana to rip the world's rules wide open and rewrite them for a single, electric moment. The youth nods, eyes wide. Mysterious as it appears, it's undeniably a raw physical phenomenon. He snarls that ordinary magic obeys rules, while a magic god's power answers to none. He boils it down. Ordinary magic obeys math, but a god's magic grabs the pen and writes its own answer. The youth cuts a shadowed silhouette against his roaring power, proclaiming this is the very essence of a magic god. He sneers that a mortal desperate to copy it is nothing but a child aping an adult, utterly blind to its true meaning. Heinrich barked his agreement, slamming it home. A human's body and magic hit a brick wall, it's impossible. The youth fixes his gaze ahead and confesses he knows his own power so intimately it's utterly absurd. He knows the Empire's true aim, to dissect and study the power coursing through him. He fixes his gaze on the bustling city below, feeling thousands hold their breath as they wait for a new magic god to step forward and join forces. That single thought siphons every scrap of joy from his day. He swats the idea aside like a fly, snarling he won't touch that mess, and flat out refuses the job offer. He spun on his heel and strode off, calling to Heinrich that their sightseeing tour was moving on. Heinrich drops into a low bow, submitting to his master's decision. Tour of the capital complete, the two stride off toward the horizon. Their carefree vacation shatters as the story hurls them headfirst into the cold, ruthless battlefield of politics. We touch down in the Rand Kingdom, staring up at a brooding castle that crowns the former Margravate of Rays. Inside, two delegations lock horns at a tense table, hammering out the war's official end. The imperial representative beams like a sunrise, overjoyed that peace is finally within reach. His grin is so wide it almost makes you trust him. He delivers a formal proposal to begin the armistice talks, flanked by resolute military commanders. All the Rand Kingdom's leaders can muster is a grim, silent nod. The representative strides forward and announces, "I'm Zone, the Empire's diplomat." Klaus himself spearheaded the invasion forces. An eye-patched officer storms forward and snaps, Lambert, Klaus's adjutant. Across from them, Crown Prince Edward of the Rand Kingdom slumped, defeated and broken, the kingdom's heir reduced to a shadow. Beside him, the grim-faced king bolted for the eighth. Their flustered prime minister, Harry Org, chokes out a stammered attempt to speak. The prince snaps him mid-sentence, "No introductions, you both know who you are." The sight hit the delegation like a gut punch, sweat beading on every brow, disbelief carved into their faces. Klaus and his adjutants anchor themselves like iron, faces hard and confidence unshakable. The King of Rand bears a predatory grin, tearing into Zone's supposed competence. Zone shrugs off the praise like it's nothing, crowning Klaus the real military authority and insisting he's only a humble civil servant. He insists they plucked him to be the representative, nothing but a convenient pawn shoved into someone else's game. The King of Rand and his prime minister froze, jaws hanging open at Zone's offhand self-mockery. The prince's fist snapped shut, knuckles blanching white as they drove into the table's polished wood. Beads of sweat raced down the prime minister's face as the full, crushing weight of humiliation slammed into them. Pinned to their own occupied land, they're dragged into a high-stakes negotiation over their kingdom's fate inside a minor noble's mansion. The imperial delegation lounged in icy boredom, their contempt snuffing out every hope the defeated royals had of saving face. Their lead negotiator is a man who saunters in with a smug grin and mockingly calls himself just a bit player. The king's gaze snapped to steel, his royal pride slamming hard against its breaking point. Zone chirped, beaming, that it was time to dive into the terms of the treaty he'd prepared. The king snatches the document, his eyes snapping wide as disbelief rips through him. Not a treaty, it's a roll call of the vanished, and the Empire's opening strike slams down, cold as death. Cold sweat drenched the prime minister as the terms slammed into him. They'd cripple their entire nation. The King of Rand erupted, blasting the demands as utterly heartless. Zone's ice-cold gaze locked on them, unwavering as he snapped, "Which part of me is heartless?" The king stands pinned, forced into a vacant stare, as his royal authority lies utterly shattered. Zone snarls that they should count themselves lucky to even exist. This is the only offer they'll get. The prime minister slams their fist on the table, roaring that they can't govern under these conditions. Zone's reflection grins like ice, sneering that it's their problem, not his, who could argue with that kind of brutal logic. He rips into the king's competence, shredding his authority and driving the knife deeper. All the king can do is gnash his teeth, crushed under the weight of his own defeat. Zone unleashes the crushing final blow. The Empire won't bow, and refusal will trigger another full-scale invasion. Zone's gaze sears the room as he declares their terms unreasonable, exactly what he intended. The King of Rand explodes, roaring as he denounces the Empire's brutal, unprovoked invasion. The Zone treats it as the law of nature, a lion ripping into its prey. He smirks, taunting that shipping him off as a disposable pawn is the whole point, to humiliate. Horror froze the king as Zone slammed down the ultimatum, bow into subjugation or burn in hell. His royal pride shatters, his face twists into a raw, powerless mask of rage. Klaus and his adjutant stand back, faces carved from stone while the drama explodes around them. The king pivots to Prince Edward, eyes blazing as he snaps, "Why are you silent?" The prince snaps, roaring that they'd be better off razing his kingdom to the ground than enduring this mockery. He's having a brutal day at the office. Clausen's retainers held their nerve, shrugging off his outburst as nothing more than a predictable feudal demand. Prince Edward agrees, his voice razor-sharp. The Empire would gain absolutely nothing from a truce. Rage crackles in his voice as he demands to know why they'd even staged this humiliating charade. Zone's gaze hardens to ice as he reveals the reason: a certain individual has set a condition. The prince froze, disbelief roaring in his chest. Who dares dictate terms to the Empire? Both the king and his prime minister reel, dumbfounded as the sudden revelation slams into them. Zahn roared it was a magic god they all knew, who slammed his authority down and froze the invasion in its tracks. The king of Ran's voice shattered as he stammered, "Magic god," the words ricocheting through the dead-silent room. Zone pivots to the king, rips away the sun's false mask, and thunders about the crushing weight of a parent's duty. The scene snaps into memory. A young boy stares back, that familiar ironclad determination burning in his eyes. The king looms over the boy, a silent flicker of old memories in his eyes as he realizes the terrifying power this child now wields. The king of Rand is adrift in memory's fog, clawing through fragments to pin the face of this forgotten son. His memory snaps back. A child launched himself from the castle walls, strange and distant. Prince Edward snarled, refusing to believe the towering magic god before him could be his own brother. A single brutal thought battered the king. Besides Edward, there was another son, and it couldn't be him. He can't forget the quiet boy, perched alone on the ramparts, staring out at the world. He'd branded the child hopelessly useless. That was one savage performance review. That boy's stoic, unreadable face is seared into his memory, gnawing at him day and night. Zone drops a bombshell. The impossible is true. The forgotten son Ludo has become a magic god. The king's face buckled into raw horror as the full cost of his blunder slammed into him. Prince Edward reels, breath snagging, as it hits him. Their kingdom's fate now hangs on the very brother they once cast aside. The king of Rand gapes, his world splintered into shards by the news. Prince Edward squeezes his eyes shut as the brutal truth of their mistake slams into him. Zone snapped it wasn't incompetence, it was a deliberate act, and they were too blind to see it. He drops the bomb. The entire negotiation was arranged at Ludo's explicit request. Shock explodes across the king's face, then his features snap into a white-hot, impotent fury. Denial claws at the prime minister as he splutters that Ludo can't possibly be a magic god. Doubt claws at him. What if the Empire staged this entire thing as another elaborate trap? Zone hoists the truce like a trophy, proclaiming it the ultimate proof of Ludo's power. He declares a magic god is the ultimate wild card. One strike can remake the entire world. Now that's holding the ultimate ace. Blinded by arrogance, they flung their greatest ace aside, utterly unaware of its power. Klaus stared unblinking, his eyes delivering a mute verdict. The impossible was real. Prince Edward's eyes snapped wide as disbelief and dawning horror washed over him. Klaus revealed that Ludo struck a deal with the Empire to protect his homeland. He hurled himself forward, offering his own body as a captive to buy the kingdom's survival. Cornered by a god of magic, the Empire had to swallow his terms. Zone's words cut like ice. He declares the Rand kingdom has no moves left. The king's hand quivers as his mind scrambles to grasp why this is happening. Prince Edward can only stare, eyes frozen, as their family's mistake slams into him like a boulder, crushing him under its weight. At last the king erupts, roaring at Ludo, "Why won't you lend your power to us now?" The prime minister agrees, exploding into a roar that none of this would have happened if Ludo had ever been useful. Talk about a catastrophic management blunder. The king bellows with fury, declaring that despite every ounce of his power, Ludo remains nothing but an incompetent captive. Klaus's ice-cold gaze sliced the room, forcing everyone to rethink what incompetence even means. He snarls, "Do you really think you're the competent ones in this situation?" The king's voice cracked as he spat. "Do you dare, Klaus, to call us worse than the traitor who abandoned us?" Klaus sneers, his expression slamming the conversation shut. It's screaming, "I couldn't care less." He rips into their failures, casts a key noble into exile, and then can't stop that noble's rampage. His adjutant still shudders, replaying the battlefield's chaos, born directly from their disastrous leadership. Klaus tore into them. The invasion inexplicably stopped, and nobody even bothered to investigate, an epic dereliction of duty. He keeps hammering the point. Even now, they're just making fools of themselves and have no real strategy. Their failures piled into an endless mountain, each misstep another stone they heaved onto their own shoulders. Klaus adds that rumors of a new magic god had already swept the capital, every street buzzing to welcome Ludo. The king thundered, how could they possibly have known any of this? Klaus drops a bomb. The Empire deliberately leaked info about Ludo, and they were so incompetent they didn't even notice. The king erupts, slamming the young general with a furious accusation. He's grown unbearably arrogant. Klaus smirks, eyes cold, and taunts, "Want to call off the truce talks for good." When the meeting was called, the Empire had already sealed its pact with Ludo. Ludo had sealed the truce, but the king's own moves were already tearing it to shreds. Klaus's voice cut like ice. Whether the king accepts the terms or not, it changes nothing for them. He confesses they baited him on purpose, goading him into rejecting the offer, next-level reverse psychology. All the while, Zone absorbs every word, his stone-cold, placid island amid the king's roaring fury. Klaus's adjutant watches the proceedings, with an ice-cold, unblinking stare that pins every move. At last the king snaps, choking back his pride and roaring that he accepts the truce. Klaus smirks as, in a heartbeat, the king's blustering rage collapses into pitiful obedience. The king isn't done. He bellows that they'll live to regret this day. He bellows he'll use the truce to forge his strength and crush the empire. Klaus smirks, eyes alight as a sudden, baseless surge of confidence erupts, leaving him openly amused. The king unveils his masterstroke, engineer a prisoner swap through razor-sharp negotiations to snatch Ludo back, a galaxy-brained gambit. The entire imperial delegation stared back, frozen and dripping with stunned, silent judgment. Klaus fixed the man with a look of raw, unfiltered pity. With icy calm, he declares he'll only let regret bite if those negotiations actually succeed. The king bellows he'll snatch Ludo back and make them pay for this humiliation. Zone smiles, calm as ice, and declares the truce now in effect. The king slammed his fist down and ordered them to launch repatriation talks for Ludo this instant. Zone flicks the list out like a minor annoyance, prisoners' names, and the cold prices of their release laid bare. The king's eyes rake the parchment, fury coiling as he snaps, "Where's Ludo's name?" He reads, realization strikes, and horror floods his features. He explodes in rage, roaring at the imperial delegation. Zone, Klaus, and Lambert remain rock-steady as his furious outburst slams into them and bounces off. Zone's eyes flash when a clueless voice asks, what could possibly be the problem? He grins like a predator, enjoying it a little too much. The king hammers his fists onto the table, thundering, why isn't Ludo on the list? The prime minister's voice stammers as realization hits. The price will devour decades of the national budget. Zone coolly pushes his glasses up and drawls, pay the fee and Ludo is yours. The king slams his fist, roaring at the outrageous price. Zone leans forward, voice calm and steel strong, insisting it's justified by iron logic. He lays bare how the prices were hammered out from Acacia and Stark's worth. A magic god's value, he thunders, equals the military might of an entire nation. Smirking, he lays out the formula like a showman, folding years of service and economic impact into every number, then slams down a painstaking, line-by-line invoice. The king and prince froze in place, staring back with disbelief and rage blazing in their eyes. A brutal truth slams into the king. He'd bleed the royal coffers dry and bury his people under crushing taxes to drag Ludo back. He explodes, bellowing that he can't accept it and won't stand for such a ridiculous demand. Zone's steady voice cuts through the tension as he calmly urges a short break so they can cool their heads. The prime minister can only slide forward a defeated agreement, his spirit shattered and hollow. Zone snorted, voice sharp with contempt. How much longer will you keep insulting the empire's intelligence? He sneers, calling this pitiful spectacle unworthy of a king. Klaus shuts his eyes, disinterest draining the life from the proceedings. The young general stamps a decisive step, pivots sharply, and strides out of the room. He stalks out, lips sealed. Zone reads the silence and knows the show is over. The king of Rand explodes in fury, bellowing he'll never accept this. Zone's voice stays steady as he urges them to take their time hashing it out. Then he pivots and tails Klaus. The adults are slipping out of the room. He freezes, leans in, and drops one final bone-chilling piece of counsel. He slams out a warning. Those chosen as magic gods have already ripped their past lives to shreds. He snapped, do you really expect Ludo to fling his arms wide and take you back? The scene explodes into a grand ceremony as a man strides onto the dais and unleashes a rousing address to his beloved citizens. He plants himself before a massive, roaring crowd and proclaims it an honor to have this opportunity. From the crowd, a lone spectator fixed them with a knife-edged stare, mentally scoring every move. He couldn't fathom why they'd stage such a gaudy, over-the-top spectacle. A young woman, grinning like she holds every secret, declares it's to usher in the new god of magic. The speaker pressed on, his voice thundering across the plaza. She spells out the political gains, forecasts an economic surge, and levels a cold warning at their rivals. And sitting beside her is Ludo, scowling with icy contempt as the whole affair bores him stiff. Her smile snaps into a sly grin. She's hiding one last reason for this whole spectacle. She rips off her mask and exposes the truth. Her purpose is to make them husband and wife, both in name and in reality. Ludo shrugs it off as just an engagement, and she snaps that the marriage is already a done deal. He can only sigh as the truth crashes over him. Their opinions are polar opposites. But she grins, tossing out that for her nation, stitching together such a political compromise is child's play. Ludo snaps that he's also been forced to run a territory he never asked for. She bursts with excitement at the prospect, calling it a great experience even though she's no longer a princess. He blurts, disbelief cracking his voice. Why do the women from her country seem so used to being disliked? His gaze slides to Acushia. She's sizing herself up against the flame god. She's practically vibrating with joy, counting down the seconds until she can proudly present him to everyone. Ludo sneered at the thought of being propped up by a good-for-nothing fiancé. She snapped that a guardian god's only duty is to be there. The speaker whips around and roars, it's time to get down to business. He bellows a defiant challenge, daring the gods of ice and flame to clash. The two men stand like living mirrors, silence crackling as a dare snaps between them. Ludo locked his stare, his resolve hardening into steel as the spectacle about to erupt drew near. The official planted himself across from him, a cocky smirk curling on his lips. He goads Ludo with a razor grin, snarling, "Lost your nerve, young god." Ludo scoffs, snapping, "Cut the theatrics and get on with it." The whole nation watching, he strides to the balcony's edge. He bellows he'll give them a first taste of his true power. He thrusts his hand skyward as a brilliant light swells and gathers high above the crowd. The official strode forward and declared the empire's citizens his new compatriots. Down below, the crowd craned their necks skyward, faces twisted in baffled, electric anticipation. He roars, ordering them to stare skyward and watch the heavens unleash a blizzard of ice. Gasps rip through the plaza as accusing fingers jab into the air, a ripple of shock tearing across the crowd. The sky ignites into a dazzling spectacle, each shimmer blazing like countless stars. An electric hush grips the city, every eye locked on the spectacle. Even a mother and her child stop dead in the street, transfixed by the sight. A hand rockets out, snatching the shimmering particles as they tumble from the air. Ludo's fiancée stares, jaw slackening as recognition slowly blooms across his face. She breathes its name, and a dazzling cloud of diamond dust unfurls. He roared, "This is my power," and made clear it's only a fraction of what he can do. The crowd below dropped to hushed whispers as a dawning realization swept through them. They've just been hit with the news. A new magic god has officially descended upon the empire. He strides into the room and proclaims, "I am Ludo, the empire's newest Grand Duke." He rips the truth open. He's from the Rand Kingdom, their most recent enemy. He confesses he once stood against them, a prince of the Rand royal family. Ludo meets their fear and suspicion head-on and declares he won't deny their feelings. He dares them to hurl every doubt at him and vows he'll earn their trust, talk about a masterclass in job interview confidence. He roars that he's no fragile puppet to be tugged by their whims. A god scoffs at mortal approval. It owes mortals nothing. He insists that the moment a child cries, a superior being appears and brushes each tear away. He storms onto the balcony and bellows to the crowd that he's abandoned his homeland and pledged himself to the empire. His former subordinates freeze, eyes locked on him, as he proclaims the emperor has given him a new purpose. He savors everything he's carved out, hard-earned status, overflowing wealth, and the freedom he secured for his men. Eyes narrowed, resolve hardening into steel, he knows there's only thing left to do. He bellows he'll become the empire's shield and the spear that rips through its enemies. He throws his arm wide and roars, demanding the crowd accept him as one of their own and crown him their magic god. His fiancée watches, a pleased grin lighting her face. The speech is landing perfectly, exactly as he planned. Ludo holds his hand aloft one last time, an iron-bound seal on his vow to the people. He grips his fiancée's hand, hoists it skyward, and proclaims their union to the entire nation. He locked his fingers around his fiancée's in a firm squeeze, a wordless signal. She snapped her head up, stunned by his sudden gesture. Ludo strides back, reintroduces himself, and roars his new imperial name, Ludo Sail Coin. He thunders, "I am now the Grand Duke of the Flozal Empire." That woman beside him, third Princess Lisa Lotta, his betrothed. Boom, their engagement just went Facebook official. The princess tilts a gentle, satisfied smile as the proclamation rings out over the crowd. Below, the crowd exploded into thunderous cheers, drowning everything as they crowned their new hero. Ludo watched, his face a sealed vault, eyes tracking every detail as he drank in the scene. The grand ceremony evaporated into silence, swallowed by a heavy, cloud-choked sky. The story plunges into pitch black as an uncanny pressure tightens and pulses inside the void. He threads his way through a surging, faceless crowd. A shock rips through him, recognition explodes. He knows this place, this land. Across from him stood a man ripped straight from his past. A figure from the life he'd sworn was gone re-emerged. He feels recognition slam into him. This man is his, then the thought is ripped away. His hand clamps down, dragging him up from the choking depths of the memory. Ludo bolts upright in bed, heart pounding, as he realizes it was all just a dream. He realizes it's his first dream since ascending to magic godhood. Apparently, even gods get twisted nightmares. Sunlight slammed through the curtains, and he decided it was time to get up. A soft, familiar voice slips through the doorway, greeting him from just outside his room. His fiancée Lieselot fires a cheerful good morning his way. He admits it's only his second day in this new land. A smile lights her face as she gently shepherds him to the dining table. They stand in Sanderica, a coastal territory ruled directly by the emperor. The map screams of vital port, one of the empire's most prized financial strongholds. This land, now christened the Gascon territory, was bestowed upon Lieselotta. She declares it's the empire's seal, proof of just how prized he is. She smiles, cool and unreadable, and coaxes them to accept the official story, at least for now. He snorts at the idea of a new god being raised by a 12-year-old girl. He's already sworn off his new babysitter. She asks if he has any work planned. Ludo shrugs, grins, and declares he'll be taking it easy. Lieselot snaps at him. Don't stir up needless confusion just because you're in unfamiliar territory. Ludo snaps that he still plans to do nothing more than the bare minimum of his duties. Her jaw dropped when he suddenly volunteered to pitch in. Ludo's pride as a man roars to life. He won't let a younger girl take care of everything. He slams his fist and roars he'll live up to the Empire's expectations for placing him here. He drops a jaw-dropping, dead-simple fix for the port's seafood freshness problem. He'll just make ice. Lieselot falters, a warning edge in her voice as she asks if he's really going to meddle in politics. Ludo explodes, explaining that tying an entire industry to one person is a disaster waiting to happen. Lieselot beams, clasps his offer with a grateful nod, and vows to use it to help the people. She vows to repay the warm welcome they've received, and words die in Ludo's throat. A grand parade surged through the city streets, the crowd roaring wild cheers as they arrived. The crowd exploded into a thunderous roar, cheering as their new leaders finally swept into Sanderica. The royal carriage threads through a roaring sea of adoring citizens, their cheers crashing all around it. Princess Lieselot swept her hand in a silken arc, nailing the public performance for the gathered citizens. Inside, Ludo sits across from her, bristling as every eye drills into him. He stands at the window, staring down at the roaring crowd below, silent as they chant and cheer a welcome made just for him. His face screams pure boredom. Guest parades are so not his scene. Crowds jab fingers skyward, jaws dropping as the legendary ice god looms before them. The procession barreled on as a sea of outstretched hands urged them onward through the city's streets. Lieselot shuts her eyes, a small, satisfied smile curving her lips as everything snaps perfectly into place. Back at the dining table, Lieselotta leans in, eyes aflame, and fires a sharp question at Ludo about what he uncovered during his inspection of the city. Ludo admitted he'd been floored by the raw, crackling energy radiating from Sanderica's people. He reveals the whole town crackled with rumors about their new magic god. He stumbled onto a local delicacy, a humble, briny soup made from nothing but fresh fish and seawater. Lieselot fixates on the dish, curiosity crackling in his eyes, then asks what his plans are for the day. Ludo burst onto the sunlit streets, launching straight into another inspection. The port city pulses with life. People flood the docks and cargo pours in like a relentless tide. He soaks up the sights and sounds of his new home, each calm detail a world away from the battlefield's chaos. He strides up to a swinging, weathered tavern sign that proclaims the Seagull Pavilion. Ludo cracks a grin as he spots the exact place the food stall owner had recommended. He steps into the tavern, and a roaring tide of clinking mugs, laughter, and lively chatter from the patrons hits him. A young waiter, grin blazing, beckons him toward an open table. Ludo claims a seat and stares in disbelief. The place is jammed way more than he'd expected. The young waiter steps forward, and Ludo pins him with a hard stare before firing a few sharp, probing questions. He smirks. This so-called hidden gem is jam-packed. The staff darts between packed tables, frantically juggling orders as the tavern's unexpected popularity explodes. A smug grin snaps across his face as he realizes he ignited the sudden rush. The staff is swamped, remembering the food vendor had been calling everyone to come here. Word spreads like wildfire when a god's in town. Ludo seizes the young waiter's attention, priming him to take his order. He calls for ale and a local dish, practically buzzing to sink his teeth into the town's famed specialty. The waiter beams and urges us to dive into their brand new fried potatoes, freshly debuted on the menu. Ludo staggers back, jaw dropping. This local delicacy is utterly foreign to him. The boy beams and declares it's no ordinary dish. He invented it himself. Ludo snaps, "You the kid who invented this. That accent, you're not from around here, are you?" The waiter leans in, grin bright, and says he and his sister packed up their lives in their hometown and moved here to work at the tavern. Ludo winces and blurts an apology. He can feel his questions might have crossed a line. He flashes a grin, eyes glittering, and declares curiosity is second nature to someone like him. He bursts out that his dream is to become an inventor, burning with a restless joy for dreaming up and building brand new creations. Ludo leans in, hanging on every syllable, as the boy's voice trembles while he begs to know why his creation never caught on. Ludo's grin erupts as the truth slams into him. This dish is the boy's very first invention. Ludo grins at the boy and declares that even if the idea was lifted from elsewhere, it's still a dazzling stroke of genius. Crimson blooms across the young waiter's cheeks as unexpected praise catches him off guard and fills him with shy, glowing pride. Gratitude floods the boy's face as Ludo snaps a coin his way, a sly tip tossed with a crooked grin. The waiter lunges, snatching it from midair, surprise exploding in his wide eyes. He gapes at the imperial silver coin, a currency he's never seen. Ludo winced, blurted a quick apology for prying, then ordered ale and a steaming plate of fried potatoes. The boy grins, declares I'm Rick, and vows to throw in extra service to repay his kindness. Ludo flashes a grin and declares, I can't wait. He jabbed a finger at a woman glaring daggers at them and snarled, is that Rick's sister? Someone's about to be in serious trouble. Panic rips through Rick and he bolts, scrambling off and leaving Ludo standing there to wait for his meal. Ludo smirks, watching the siblings bicker, and can't help admitting they get along shockingly well. A sly grin tugs at his lips as he revels in the strange, electric bond he's forged with the young inventor. A moment later, a steaming plate of fried potatoes slid into place before him. She sweeps in holding his ale like an offering, apology burning on her lips for her brother's brazen forwardness. She flashes a grin and declares she's rewarded his kindness by piling his plate sky-high with an extra-large portion. Ludo snatched a fry and scrutinized the unfamiliar snack, curiosity burning in his gaze. He sank his teeth in, every nerve braced to deliver a verdict on the boy's very first invention. A slow, satisfied smile unfurls across his face. It's surprisingly delicious. He bit in, pleasure flipping to agony as scalding heat seared his mouth. They were fresh out of the fryer. Across the room, Rick's sister plants her feet, squares up to a group of rowdy patrons, and bellows that the tavern is full. 3 local thugs prowled the street, fists clenched and eyes hungry for a fight. Ludo lifts his ale, takes a quick, deliberate sip and sneers. Festivals always drag the idiots out. Rick steps between them, voice calm and firm, placating the crowd as he politely urges them to wait until a table clears. They won't wait, they bark, get lost. Ludo eyes the crowd and grins. Wherever people gather, the fragile fabric of public order starts to fray. Tension explodes as one of the men clamps a hand onto Rick's shoulder. The group's leader loomed over the boy, voice snapping like a whip as he ordered him to clear their path. A storm crosses Ludo's face as his quiet meal is shattered. Rick's sister barreled in, planted herself between the men and the crowd, and barked at them to quit hassling the other customers. A thug's shove silences her plea and hurls her to the ground. They just picked the wrong tavern to mess with. The thug snarled, barking that they should scram before they got hurt. Rage exploded from him as he spat, Rick's a worthless brat. He erupts in a roar and rockets forward, fist cocked to strike. His fist rockets past Ludo, who smirks, utterly bored by the spectacle. One lightning-quick, perfectly placed foot sent the thug stumbling. His eyes shoot wide with shock as his feet skid out from under him. Ludo lunged to halt his fall, but his face slammed square into the wooden floor, now that escalated fast. His stare was ice, totally unfazed, as violence suddenly exploded around him. The thug crumpled, limbs twitching, lights out from a single flawless strike. Silence slams into the tavern, every head snaps up, jaws dropping in stunned disbelief. Ludo pivots, his calm gaze drilling into the 2 thugs left, every muscle coiled to strike. They freeze solid, eyes locked, their bravado obliterated. He barks at them to drag their unconscious friend away and disappear. Shock explodes into rage. They unsheathe their blades and plant their feet, refusing to back down. Ludo lifts a finger as a ghostly wisp of icy energy coils and shivers at the fingertip. A knife thunders into the table before them, the last wordless warning. A third member of their crew bursts into view, a woman, twin blades flashing in her hands. Even with reinforcements flooding in, the thugs break into a cold sweat as the crushing truth hits. They're hopelessly outmatched. Ludo snapped his eyes shut, utterly unmoved as their showboating died on its feet. Scorching pain from that hot potato fry rips his focus apart. Priorities, people. A ragged cry rips through the chaos, not from the fight but from Ludo, his tongue still aflame. The female thug sizes up their razor-sharp moves and snarls. Former mercenaries, no question. Rick's sister flashes a knowing grin and drops that she once walked the halls of the Magic Academy. Ludo watches, realization snapping into place as he sees the fierce fire that fuels her confidence. She thunders, "I'm Natra, Rick's older and way stronger sister." The thug pivots, roaring that using magic in an assault is a serious crime. The threat slams down, and both Rick and Natra freeze, concern snapping across their faces. Ludo blew out a frustrated sigh. He'd plunged into this mess and torpedoed any hope of a quiet meal. The thug sneered, bragging his brothers in the city guard and vowing to throw everyone behind bars. Natra's gaze steels, her resolve rock solid as the empty threat bounces off her. Ludo coolly tells Rick to fetch some rope. He's dragging these thugs to jail himself. The young waiter goes rigid, words tumbling out in a frantic stammer. "You can't just do that." Ludo's gaze went black as he said, voice low and dangerous, that he has a certain standing here. Rick and Natra froze, eyes wide, stunned as the stranger snapped into command. The thug freezes, dumbfounded, his mind stumbling to grasp what's happening. It all snaps into place. That commanding newcomer can only be a noble serving the new lord. Sweat beads on the thug's brow as a cold truth slams him. Impersonating a noble will get him killed. Ludo smirks, claiming only a vague standing and savoring the air of mystery like a weapon. He snaps, "All of us to the city guard, let's clear this up." The thug crumples into a shaking, sobbing heap, terror written on every ragged breath. The three thugs lie sprawled on the floor, ropes biting their wrists, perfectly bound and primed for delivery. Rick Beams volunteers to take care of it, then yanks the thugs away himself. He drags them on a humiliating walk of shame, snarling that their futures hang by a single thread. Rick and Natra stood rooted, disbelief choking them as their mysterious benefactor slipped into the shadows. Back at the mansion, a furious attendant storms up to Ludo, eyes blazing as he demands an explanation. The man snaps, ripping into him for igniting a scene just seconds after they set foot in their new territory. Ludo sprawls on the couch, shrugs, and casually tosses out that he already apologized, so apparently that's the end of it. The attendant huffs, glares, and snaps that his antics are sullying Princess Lysolot II's name. He warns that whispers of discord could spread like wildfire, but Ludo shrugs and flicks his hand, brushing the concern aside. Ludo snaps upright, insisting he understands the political implications perfectly. Ludo's jaw clenched and resolve flared. If the attendant kept insisting, he'd have to take action. He whirls to leave and snaps, "I'm paying Lysolot a visit right now." He swears a late-night visit will prove to everyone there on good terms. He swears the gesture is everything. Even if she's already asleep, it still counts. He barks at the attendant to follow if he understands, but hang back. He can't be seen with a helper. The attendant scoffs, "You're seriously gonna lecture me on political maneuvering, Ludo." Ludo snaps, "Exactly," gives a dismissive wave and walks off. He strode down the mansion's grand, moonlit hallway, each footfall echoing like a verdict. He rockets into a sprint, resolve like wildfire to pull his plan off. At last he bursts forward and plants himself before the ornate doors of the princess's chambers. He plants his feet and declares this is the place, resolve hammering in his chest. He rapped on the door and loudly proclaimed his presence to the princess. From inside, Lysolot's ears snap to his voice as surprise sparks in her tone. She yanks the door open, eyes flashing, and demands, "Why are you here at this hour?" Ludo bursts in, apology tumbling from his mouth. "Sorry I'm late. Did I catch you at a bad time?" She smiles and says she'd been drinking in the moonlit sea. He admits his attendant feared he'd been ignoring his fiancée. He decreed they spend time together to forge a tighter bond, a cold, calculated political gambit. Lysolot's smile curls into a sly grin as she taunts him for daring to show up this late. Ludo locks eyes with her, the dim light carving his face into an unreadable mask. Ludo lays his intentions bare and tells her she's free to refuse his company. She flashes a sly grin and owns up. It was just a little payback for his sudden arrival. The buzzer screamed game over. She rose, regal and unreadable, and formally beckoned him into her private chambers. The balcony doors swing wide, spilling a vast, star-studded night into the room. He strides in, a jagged silhouette against the room's decadent opulence. She launched a flurry of gestures to press him into his seat, then seized control of the conversation. Under the moonlight, she leaned in and fired the question, "What do you want to talk about at this late hour?" A sly, knowing smile curls on her lips as she shoots. Is this about matters of state? She drops a bomb. He came for another reason. She fires, "Are you here to discuss them taking separate actions?" That question drops like a grenade. Lisa Lott's grin ignites like a dare as she asks if he's ready to make their union official. She plants a steady hand on his shoulder and vows she won't stand in his way if that's truly what he wants. Ludo froze mid-step, blindsided by her audacious proposition. His shot snaps into a cocky, knowing smirk. Game on, two can play at this game. He grins, calls it adorable when kids play grown-up, then lays it out bluntly. She's too young for this. He sneers that her seduction act is nothing more than a child in grown-up clothes. Lisa Lotta's expression sours, her carefully crafted facade buckles and collapses. She exhaled a ragged, defeated sigh. Her tiny test had spectacularly crashed and burned. She clenched her jaw and admitted he'd danced through her trap, stripping her of every retort. Ludo smirks and leans in, telling her the whole charade was laughably obvious from the very first moment. He jabbed at the distance between them, snapping that her seduction had been nothing but an act. Lisa Lotta leans in, as he sneers that only a fool would bite at such a half-hearted ploy. He presses the point. A woman who truly wanted to close the gap would be charging forward, grabbing the initiative instead of hanging back. Ludo smirks, sneering that if she can't even sell a convincing act, the whole scheme falls apart, her acting career's finished before it even starts. His razor-sharp analysis slices through the princess's confident mask, finally shattering it. She shuts her eyes in defeat and concedes. He was undeniably right. Ludo's voice cracks into softness as he apologizes for being condescending and for treating her like a child. Lisa-Lot snaps her head up at his apology, stunned, and shame seizes her as she silently scolds herself for what she did. He flashes a wry grin and admits they're only just getting to know each other. A real relationship is still a long way off. She agrees, insisting that's exactly why they should talk more and forge a genuine connection. Lizelot's smile blooms with sincerity as she agrees. This is the first step for them as a couple. Ludo pivots the conversation, leaning in and proposing they dig into what he'd seen in the city earlier that day. She swept her hand toward the moonlit city below, beckoning him to begin. The story explodes into a different time, a different place, and an electrifying new face. A spiky-haired young man plants himself in the bustling square, pulse racing as he soaks in the dazzling city of inventions. He pushes through the crowd and is stunned to find the air utterly dead. He halts at a market stall, a single item on display snagging his gaze and igniting his curiosity. The vendor crowed that his apprentice had made it, shoving it forward as a bargain trinket for a lady friend. He threw back a cheeky laugh and dared the vendor to send his own partner to buy it. As he strode away, the vendor slammed the item down and roared that it came from the Ramuro kingdom. He's fascinated by the ornate, centuries-old patterns of a distant Western country. His eyes snap to a familiar face in the crowd. It's Rick, the young waiter, who freezes as recognition slams into him like a punch to the gut. The spiky-haired man halted mid-step, disbelief ripping through him. The young inventor was here too. He locks eyes and snaps. It's Rick from the Sigil Pavilion, miles from home. Rick's grin explodes across his face, pure joy surging as he realizes the stranger actually remembers him. The man calls after him, "Hold on, I've got something to say." He whirls back to the vendor, resolve flaring, and commits to buying one of the fabrics. He leans in, asks if there are more like it, aching to buy them all, but his pockets betray him, utter window-shopping agony. The vendor beams, clapping his hands in thanks and declaring he's been a fixture in this city for years. He flashed a grin and vowed he'd march into the vendor's flagship store someday. He barreled back to Rick, breathless and frantic, blurting an apology for keeping the young inventor waiting. Rick gapes at the fabric, stunned he'd actually bought it. The man always just window shops. He grins, eyes alight, admitting his hunger for rare treasures lured him to this city. The young inventor leans in, hanging on every word as a bright spark of understanding ignites behind his eyes. He fires off, "Is Rick here to shop too?" And the boy falters, hesitation written all over him. Rick's hesitation shatters as a proud grin erupts. He's here to open his own stall. His eyes blazed alive, seized by the boy's fierce ambition. He plants a steady hand on Rick's shoulder, an unspoken roar of encouragement. Rick flushes and shrugs off his creations like they're nothing, while the man leans in, eyes blazing with eager hunger to see them. A grin rips across the man's face as he tells Rick to lead the way, promising to buy anything that catches his eye. A title card bursts onto the screen, declaring the boy Rick, the inventor of fried potatoes. A memory explodes into view, Rick's humble, burning dream to become an inventor. The scene snaps back to Ludo, swallowed by the crushing weight of his new title in the Floisal Empire. Back in the city, Rick slams his palm out and drives his new friend toward his humble market stall. They burst into a dusty courtyard where vendors crouched around their wares, everything spread out on simple blankets. The traveler swept his gaze over the rundown plots, scoffing at the crummy lots. This was rock bottom, the kind of place you claw your way up from. Rick shrugs, admitting that with no connections, this was the best spot he could snag. His heart vaults as he locks eyes with a familiar face who shouts that his sister has returned. Natra's voice rang out as she called to her brother, her arrival a bright, welcome sight in the bustling market. Nacho's eyes snap to the traveler and recognition explodes. It's the mysterious customer from the tavern. Ludo grins, the memory of how he'd slyly dropped hints about his noble birth back, then flashing through his mind. He tells them not to worry, insisting he rarely flaunts his authority. Natra snaps, demanding to know what became of the thugs they took down at the Seagull Pavilion. Ludo freezes for a beat, a sheepish, crooked smile tugging at his lips. He smirks and drops that they've been sentenced to forced labor in the mines, won't be bothering anyone for a long while. He switched the subject on a dime, practically begging Rick to unveil his latest inventions. Splayed across the blanket was a chaotic stash of tools, tangled hangers, and bizarre contraptions that looked like they might leap to life. Ludo's jaw dropped, genuine awe coursed through him as he drank in the flawless, masterful metalwork. Rick beams, slamming them down like trophies, and declares, "These are the hard-won fruits of my sweat and relentless dedication." Ludo jabbed a finger, voice razor-bright. "Natra, did you forge this metalwork?" Rick grins and drops the bomb. His family owns a magic workshop, and Natra is the one who crafts every enchanted piece. Ludo's jaw drops. He's stunned to learn her skills are in fierce demand. Natra lowers her gaze, smiles shyly, and beams that she's simply thrilled to stand behind her brother's dream. Ludo's chest clenched. He knew the two siblings had nothing left but each other. He asks for a recommendation, and Rick practically explodes, thrusting his best work into their hands. He brandishes a weird gadget, declaring it a camper's treasure, brazen praise for a mere metal stick. Ludo's gaze honed to a blade, curiosity, igniting at the sight of the unfamiliar tool. Rick hoists it like a trophy and declares it a high-performance fire starter. He strikes once and proves a simple blow can ignite a blazing spark. Natra cuts him off with a derisive laugh, unmoved by her brother's theatrical sales pitch. She champions a simple fire starter, insisting it tames the flames just as well and costs only a fraction of the fancy gear. Rick swears his version still runs soaked to the bone, so it's a can't-miss investment. Ludo snatched up the device, curiosity blazing as the siblings' debate hooked him. He tested it on himself, a brilliant spark ignited, proving the young inventor's claim. His face hardened into steel as he leaned in and demanded Rick tell him, down to the tiniest detail, exactly how he made it. He blurts a quick apology, realizing his voice may have sliced too deep. Ludo rephrased, voice razor-keen, did Natra's magic actually conjure this from Rick's idea? He snaps, "Do you have a prototype, or even a single fragment of the original?" A lightning glance shoots between the siblings, and they nod in unison. It's a yes. Ludo's features snapped into a stone mask. He'd just laid eyes on something priceless. He barked at the siblings to pack up their stall and steer, clear of the invention fair. He hurls a coin over his shoulder, its clink a blunt payment for their time. This isn't some random coin, it's emblazoned with the Grand Duke's crest. He barks an order, deliver it to the Gascogna ducal residence within the next few days. Rick and Natra freeze, mouths slammed shut and eyes wide, utterly baffled as the sudden command crashes over them. He leans in, demanding an answer, and they choke out a hurried, stammering yes. He flashed one final wave and snapped, "Don't be late, guess that's one way to make an appointment." The two stood dumbfounded, watching him stride away as their minds reeled from the encounter. Elsewhere in the city, a grim-faced man prowls the streets, his eyes slicing through the crowd as if hunting someone. That stern-faced guy, turns out he's Ludo's attendant, and apparently he's been tailing Ludo the whole time. He leans in, voice low, and declares there's one more message he wants Ludo to deliver. Ludo brandishes the fabric he just bought and snaps, "What does this mean?" The attendant says it's a one-of-a-kind import, so he snapped it up. Ludo doesn't waste a beat, snapping, "What's the actual message?" First instruction, slip Rick and Natra Hush. Hush invites to the mansion, bring them in quietly and keep it on the down low. The attendant grins and confesses he'd been watching the siblings, branding them promising talent. He then confirms Ludo had brandished the ducal crest, an emblem etched into their minds. Across town, a rival merchant hawked the same fabrics and rallied his people with a fierce cry to storm the city's markets. The attendant fires one last warning at Ludo, "Don't get carried away, but our boy's already gone." Back in the moonlit mansion, Ludo locked eyes with Lieselot and declared he had two things to report. The princess leaned in, curiosity surging as the conversation snapped into an unexpected direction. Ludo admits it's serious, the kind of political talk that makes his blood boil. Lieselot's eyes flared open a fraction, surprise cutting through her expression. She can read him if he brings up politics, the issue is too big to ignore. He wastes no words. He spotted divine soldiers marching through the city today. Her playful grin collapses into steel. A razor-focused gaze drills into him as she demands every detail. Not mere soldiers, they're the blessed followers of the magic god Stark, charged with his arcane power. Tactical mages, forged into living weapons and unleashed as a brutal fighting force, a walking army. Lieselot recalls the chilling moment she watched a lone fighter shred an entire elite Imperial squad. Ludo's voice drops to a dangerous whisper. Stark can pour his power into anyone he chooses. They treat divine soldiers like disposable tools, coldly scrapping them for fresh replacements, even when they're still children. Tactical-level mages strike with surgical precision, then get tossed into the shadows as expendable pawns on covert missions. Lieselot snaps, "How did you identify them?" Urgency blazing in her voice. "If the enemy's on the move, they must act now." He rips the truth out. It was pure chance, and he can't fathom the full reach of their scheme. Ludo leans in, eyes blazing, and asks if she can feel a magic god's unique aura, that crushing, unmistakable pulse of divine authority. She nods sharply, eyes narrowing. "I've heard of it. It's the wellspring of their immense power." He bursts out, claiming he saw that exact aura pouring off one of the figures in the city. He felt them closing in, but what they were after stayed buried in shadow. Lieselot's stare snaps ice cold. Deploying them so openly is a brazen, ugly provocation. Ludo snarled that he could only confirm they were inside his territory. He couldn't track where they slipped off to beyond its borders. Lieselot wonders if they're moving with a brazen certainty they'll be discovered. Details still unclear, she scrambles her forces into action, ordering an immediate counterstrike. Ludo's gaze cut sharp as steel. He's already plotting several moves ahead. He smirks and says he's already planted his men to tail the targets and stake out every inch of the area around them. He admits it bluntly. His soldiers aren't spies. They can't pry into the enemy's deepest plans. Lieselot snaps into action and summons the Imperial army for reinforcements right away. She snaps, "Are your men free now?" and reveals the Empire pries a noble's forces away from the main army. Politics, am I right? Ludo's memory flared with a rumor that the military was being slimmed down, then his attendant barked at him to get back to work. Lieselot makes it crystal clear. This is to cut through confusion and carve a clean divide between the chains of command. She snaps, any large-scale military action falls squarely under the army's direct command. To stand against the divine soldier's onslaught, she must march to Ludo and formally petition him for aid. Ludo's expression hardens into stone. His men answer only to him, soldiers, not peacetime freeloaders. A pleased smile blooms on Lieselot's face at his rock-solid reliability, and she nods, agreeing to deliver his intentions. Ludo's eyes narrowed into blades of iron. If they act, it will be utterly merciless. As the first report wrapped, Lieselot leaned forward, eyes blazing, and demanded to know about the second matter he'd mentioned. He brushed it off with a scoff, insisting it's a minor matter and utterly unconnected to the divine soldiers. Confusion cracks across the princess's face as she snaps. "This isn't another political issue, is it?" Ludo grins, revealing he scouted promising talent across the city and lured them to the mansion, a little head-hunting on his day off. His mind snapped. Letting a genius like that go to waste would be madness. He had to recruit the inventor for Lieselot's cause. Lieselot scoffs. He only bothers to scout someone in person if they're nothing less than extraordinary. Ludo freezes and owns up to a small, nagging problem he has to tackle first. The princess snapped her gaze up and demanded, "What kind of problem are you talking about?" She snapped, "If your concerns turn out to be true, what are you going to do?" Ludo thrusts a hand forward and snaps that he won't just ignore it. A grim scowl carves his face. When the moment strikes, he launches forward and does whatever must be done. The scene snaps to Rick and Natra's room as Natra berates him, demanding he get some sleep. Rick trembles with worry, his mind racing as he fixates on what tomorrow will bring for them. Disbelief slammed into him. They'd actually been summoned to the ducal residence. He finally surrenders to sleep, while Natra sits quietly, eyes locked on the unbelievable future unfolding before them. Nakra lies awake, heart hammering, haunted by the truth. This whole mess started because of her carefree younger brother. She clutches the ducal coin, breath hitching as she admits the summons is an honor she can hardly believe. Only one explanation: the mysterious noble had finally bowed to the brilliance of Rick's invention. The scene flips, hurling us straight into the young inventor's buried past. A title card slams onto the screen, christening him Rick Ambrose, a strange, mysterious child. From a young age, he wielded knowledge far beyond his years, and every adult who crossed his path felt a chill of unease. Rick brushed off their protests, jaw clenching as he vowed to turn his uncanny knowledge into a force for good. He wanted only to make life easier, and that relentless hunger forged him into an inventor. The flashback snaps to the Ambrose family workshop. She clings to that time as their happiest. Natra's face crumples, sorrow crashing over her as memories of her parents flare, whispering of a hidden tragedy in their past. Natra's memory snaps to the night robbers ambushed her parents and ripped her away from the Magic Academy. Penniless and adrift, they snagged work with the warm-hearted owners of the Seagull Pavilion. She's been through hell, but hope ignites. She dares to believe this is finally their shot at a better life. The next morning, Rick crackled with excitement, eyeing the ducal summons as their ticket to success. Natra's dream is painfully simple. She yearns for a peaceful life for her and her brother. That night, Rick plants himself at his sister's bedside, silent and fierce, swearing he'll protect her no matter what. She whispers his name in her sleep, oblivious to the vow he carved into silence. A determined grin ignites his face. He vows to seize this moment and make it count for both of them. He hurls himself toward a brighter future, risking everything for his sister. Back in the mansion, Lieselot freezes, eyes blazing, and demands Ludo repeat his last words. Ludo's stare turned to ice. His decision was already sealed. He snarls again. If his suspicions are right, he'll have to make them disappear. When he says them, he's pointing straight at Rick and his sister Natra. The next morning, summoned, the siblings burst into the grand ducal residence. Ludo breezes into the room, flashes a lazy grin and tosses out, "Sorry to keep you waiting." Rick and Natra spring to their feet, voices tripping over each other as they blurt that they just got here. He snaps at them to relax, reminding everyone this isn't a formal audience. But Rick smirks and reveals the ducal coin bought him a VIP escort straight into this room. The young inventor's breath catches as they finally grasp that their mysterious benefactor is a titan. Ludo jolts to a halt, realization exploding in his chest. He never introduced himself, so now he unleashes the grand reveal. He strides forward, voice booming, "I am Ludo Sale Coin, Grand Duke of Gasconia." The siblings freeze, eyes wide, minds reeling as the revelation crashes over them. Ludo locks his gaze on them, his face a stone mask as the truth finally slams into him. A thunderbolt of truth slams into them. They crumble to their knees, frantic and begging for forgiveness. Ludo reels, jaw dropping as they collapse into frantic, terrified groveling. Natra throws herself forward, volunteering to take the fall and accept any punishment meant for her brother. Ludo shoots a knowing smirk. They're treating respect for nobility like a sacred law. He commands them to stand down, pardoning every past offense. He'd been hiding his true identity the whole time. Ludo freezes, words choking him as he scrambles to summon what comes next. Natra rockets to her feet, resolve igniting into a fierce vow. She'll protect her brother at any cost. Ludo leans in, eyes razor-sharp, and demands, "Did the nobles treat you badly? Is that why you're so fiercely protective?" Rick watches, fear and confusion blazing in his eyes. Ludo's eyes snapped sharp, intrigue flaring at her fierce, unshakable vow to protect her brother. Rick pleads, voice raw, trying to make them understand that their bond is more than family, it's everything they have. Ludo grimly realized their circumstances had left them with nothing else. They were each other's only kin. He then rigs the interrogation, dims the lights, lines in and snaps, "Speak freely." He snarls a chilling warning. Even the smallest lie will bring merciless retribution. The siblings could only choke out a terrified, yes, a blunt reminder that guests don't get to speak freely here. Ludo freezes, his face a blank mask, and he readies his questions like blades poised to strike. At last, he rips away the veil and exposes Rick's invention from the day before, the true reason for the summons. Ludo tests it and proves the device is a breeze to use, still running flawlessly even when soaked. He raves that the high-performance fire starter is a truly magnificent invention. A surprise compliment hit them like a burst of sunlight, and Rick and Natra erupted into radiant, disbelieving grins. Ludo's voice sharpened. He finally burst out the question that had been gnawing at him. Rick leans in, eyes alight, and fires. What does the Grand Duke wish to know? Ludo's smile evaporates as his face hardens into a grim mask, the friendly warmth gone. A sudden bone-deep chill slammed into the air, freezing the young inventor in stunned silence. Ludo finally demands the answer. Why did Rick decide to invent this exact device? Rick Beams flashed a grin and said he figured a waterproof fire starter would be incredibly handy. Ludo concedes the logic, but Natura's sharper, more practical argument from yesterday snaps back into his mind. Ludo scoffs, snapping that nobody in their right mind would bother reinventing the fire starter. Natra freezes, eyes wide, completely lost about where any of this is headed. Ludo grins, marveling that inventors hurl themselves after ideas everyone else writes off as pointless. He snaps that Rick's case is a jigsaw with pieces missing, it just doesn't add up. He clocked the intricate procedure and knew only Natra's magic could have conjured it. Speech dies in Rick's throat, sweat hammering his brow as the walls close in. Ludo says it hurls him straight into the burning question at the heart of it all. He respected Natra's skill, but he'd never stand by while she blindly obeyed her brother. He finally hurls the damning question. Why doesn't Natra know how it was truly made? Rick froze, pinned against the wall, as the Grand Duke's ironclad logic slammed every exit shut. Ludo declares you can't tame that tech unless you've got the knowledge to match it. He realized Natra, the mage, wouldn't let her brother drag her through a ritual this intricate. He finally storms up to Rick and accuses him bluntly. Your invention isn't original, it's built on a pre-existing model, isn't it? Ludo's convinced Rick didn't invent it from scratch. He knew, with absolute certainty, that magic could conjure it into being.